So hey guys, welcome back to the Just Fiction channel. This is a story about what if Naruto x Tsunade political marriage. Part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if, and you want to see part 2, comment down below. And let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And also share this video with your friends. And check out the description. And check out my playlist. So let's start the video. Chapter 1. The room was silent and heavy with the air of disbelief. Everyone heard exactly what she said without any problems, but the ones who weren't privy to her previous negotiations couldn't believe their ears. It had to be a joke, the preamble of a longer, more saddening situation that needed to be lightened beforehand. In front of her desk was a row of 6 people, the ones most affected by the negotiations. And behind them were their heads of state -2. The ones in front were Akatsuki of rock, Ujito of cloud, Fu of waterfall, Naruto of leaf, Mei of mist, and Temari of sand. Behind them were Inoki, Ai, Shibuki, and Gaara. Akatsuki was the first one to break. "This is a joke, right?" she asked dangerously with a smile on her face. The smile showed her teeth in a most unnatural way. It was a smile that just screamed, "This better be a joke, or I'm clawing someone's throat out." Tsunade smiled back, though hers was real and triumphant. "Absolutely not. Welcome to the most influential political marriage of all time." Ujito's jaw was rapidly clenching and unclenching. Despite her faith in her poker face and dutiful loyalty to her leadership, there were things that couldn't be allowed for. She wouldn't overtly speak out at the meeting, but a quick glance to AI was all she needed to do to get the fact across that she didn't find it acceptable in the slightest, and that there would be a follow-up. Maybe even a refusal to do her job. Fu looked shocked, but didn't share in the righteous indignation of the rest. It was unexpected, to be sure, but she was so used to talks in which she gave up at the very idea of friendship or voluntarily exiled herself into the forest, that the realization that she had a husband instead of a suicide mission was enough for her to not speak out at it. Mei looked. Well, it was always hard to tell what she was thinking through her face. She had a smile that looked genuine enough, but anyone who knew her knew that that was a mask of sorts. Anyone who knew her well knew that the mask wasn't necessarily bad. Some wore masks to hide their pain and sorrow. She wore a mask to do everything from hiding her intent to kill someone, all the way to playfully teasing her subordinates. Temari didn't know what to think. Her immediate thought was that of a certain lazy Nara who, well, they weren't dating. And it wasn't like she was crushing particularly hard on him. But still. She glanced at her husband. Absolutely not. No way. This couldn't work out. She wouldn't allow it to. Akatsuki was already turning around in her seat and yelling at her grandpa, the third Sasuke. His face was steely and cold. He rebuked all of her efforts in denial by the simple order of Akatsuki, "Sit down and stop talking." Akatsuki's mouth closed before her brain told it to. Her gramps was a stubborn old fool, but there was a reason why he was considered the strongest ninja in the village, not to mention his storied experience. He wasn't a man to be upset when he got serious. She settled for crossing her arms over her chest and glaring at her husband out of the corner of her eye. Tsunade raised a single brow. She'd expected the groom to be the one who was most vocal. Perhaps that was just the result of his training with Jiraiya, but his face made her feel that was false. He was just staring at her desk with wide eyes and a frown marrying his face. When he looked up and saw her questioning gaze, he didn't know what to say. "This is a joke, right?" he asked, reiterating Akatsuki's previous question. "This can't be real." It wasn't quite accurate to say that she enjoyed seeing him like that, but he was long overdue for a reality check. Her face softened for him. "It's a long story. Wheel. Like fucking hell, it's a long story," Akatsuki shouted. "I don't know where you get off." "Akatsuki!" Inoki barked out. Her nose flared in anger, but she was cowed back to silence. Tsunade waited for a beat or two to continue on. "Like I was saying, it's a long story, but the gist of it is that while doing paperwork, the 4th Hokage split his duties among various shadow clones. We theorize, but do not know, that the 4 marriage contracts came to him at this time, and he didn't double-check his memories for any discrepancies." Fu looked over at everyone and did a quick head count. "I count 5. Mei leaned over to meet her gaze. "I heard what was going on and put my hat into the ring too. I hope you don't mind." It was clear through her tone of voice that she didn't really care whether they minded or not. Naruto squinted his eyes. His nose crinkled up. But why me? I still don't understand even a little bit of what's going on. I just got back to Konoha today. I haven't even been home yet. Tsunade was somewhat expecting this, and already had an answer cocked. Naruto, for what purpose do arranged marriages hold in the elemental nations? He shrugged. 2. Strengthen bonds? Smaller countries do it all the time. To make alliances and stuff, right? Tsunade nodded. And how many different headbands do you see in the room right now? Naruto checked around himself a few times. 5. And how many girls or women do you see next to you? Naruto didn't have to check around himself again. 5. Tsunade splayed her hands out. Do you see where we're going with this? Naruto's face scrunched up again, though this time it was in thought. I want to make an alliance with the other 5 countries. Still though, why does this? He gesticulated around the room. Has it happened this way? Why can't we just all sign a paper or something? Yeah, Kuratsuchi piped up. This is stupid. We could just sign another treaty like all the others. Tsunade looked at her with an upturned brow. And how did all those other treaties pan out? Kuratsuchi opened her mouth, but after a few uttered syllables, closed it. But why me? Naruto continued on. Why us? Tsunade swept a hand to the 6 situated in front of her. We have an elite, Jinchuriki of the Two Tails, and step-niece-in-law of the current Raikage, the Jinchuriki, and only one of 2 strong military assets of the Hidden Waterfall, the sister to the Kazekage, leader of the Hidden Mist and carrier of 2, and granddaughter of the current Sachikage, who is also the holder of a. All these people are influential and important figures to the people of their respective 5 countries. Naruto paused and looked at the 5 more carefully. How could so many people that are so important be there? 2 of them were Jinchuriki no less. But I like Sakura. Tsunade's face softened some more. Naruto, a Hokage, has a duty to the citizenry before she has a duty to her friends and family. I have not made this decision lightly. It is, however, for the good of the people. And not just our people. For all people. You could be instrumental to peace on this continent. Naruto bit his bottom lip and sank back down to his seat. I just want to say, Temari proffered that this is a terrible plan. That piqued Tsunade's interest. Oh? Temari, with wide eyes, looked at all the people in the room. You do realize that we're all shinobi, right? You know, people who kill, lie, and cheat for a living. We're also a people with deep-seated grudges and hatreds for each other. Historically, we're the kind of people who prefer the easy way out, the way out. Even if by some miracle, we don't manage to kill each other, there are others that will absolutely take advantage of this situation to turn us against ourselves. And I have to stress, the likelihood of us not killing each other is really low. Temari pointed to Kuratsuchi and Yujito in turn. Look at them. Kuratsuchi turned to glare at the sand mistress. Sure, she hated the situation more than anyone, but she hated being looked down on even more. Yujito didn't even react. She was too busy going over in her head how she was going to tell off AI and the exact way in which she would threaten to leave if he went through with it. Tsunade looked down on Temari. And you wouldn't risk it? Sure, I have no real idea that any of you don't have ulterior motives. She turned her gaze to the 4 heads of state behind the now harem, but if there's even a 1% chance of this working, don't you want to try it out? Hunger gone. Military engagements gone. Inordinate suffering gone. If we could put less money into figuring out ways to kill each other, we could put that money into things like infrastructure, mass education, and a focus on technological developments. Us heads of state are already planning a way to pool our resources in a way that could develop our poor regions. This could change the world. Regardless, May said with her smile not slacking in the slightest. The contracts have already been signed. There's nothing any of us can do about this now. And what the hell do you get out of this? Kuratsuchi fired off. May turned her head to the girl. Excuse me? You threw your hat in the ring. You're doing this of your own free will. Why? On the outside, her expression didn't change, but there was an edge now present in her voice. My people just went through a very long, bloody, and brutal civil war. We want nothing more than peace and a future where blood doesn't have to be shed. Is that so? Because I'm pretty sure the Hidden Mist is flat broke right now. Are you sure this isn't about any of those pooled resources you're in need of? I don't see the connection. Well, I don't intend to whore myself out, even if it's for the people. If you don't shut your mouth, I'll melt you with your own guts. Do you see this? Temari asked, hands wringing her hair. We're already at each other's throats. Silence! Tsunade shouted. The room fell into an unnatural end. The annoyance that had been percolating behind in her gut finally came out in full force. Yes, you're right. This may very well be the worst idea in the history of the shinobi world. You're right. I can't trust any of you to not kill each other. You're right. I'm sure there are ulterior motives abound here. But get this through all your brains right now, this is happening. It's happening right now and right here. You better get used to it. Yujito was still stewing in thought, Fu was trying to make herself smaller, Naruto was still in shock, Kuratsuchi looked like she wanted to explode, Temari was annoyed, and Mei. Well, it was always hard to tell what she was thinking. Shizen! Shizen poked her head through the door. Is it all over? Tsunade gripped the bridge of her nose, trying to stem the oncoming headache. Show them all to where they'll be staying. Yujito stood up, practically knocking the chair back from the force. She said, I'll figure it out, before dashing out one of the open windows. AI sighed into the palm of his hand, said, Don't worry. I held up my end of the bargain, and jumped out the same window, accidentally tearing through its borders and shattering the nearby ones that were open. The headache got more intense. I need to breathe, Temari said, twirling out her fan and jumping out the window. Gaara didn't look very surprised. I'll hold it up too, he said, following her out the window. The headache was starting to hurt. Fuck this, Kuratsuchi said before shooting out the window. Anoki grumbled something indistinctly as he went after her, but it probably had something to do with him holding up the bargain as well. The headache began gripping her skull. Naruto stood up. I just need to go. The normally boisterous and energetic lad slunk out of the room past a sorry-faced Shizen. And I, Mei said, need to go to the little girl's room. Don't wait up. The Mizukage stood up and walked past Shizen as well, going the opposite direction Naruto went. Fu looked at Shizen, who was doing her best to make herself look small. Well, I guess it's just the two of us, huh? Shizen smiled nervously and nodded. Yeah. The seven-tailed Jinchuriki stood up and went to follow Shizen out of the room. Tsunade sighed and sat back down in her seat. The deep throbbing in her head was starting to die down a little bit. The door crashed back open with a red-faced Jiraiya breathing heavily. What's this I hear about a political marriage? What the hell were you thinking? And the headache came back full force. Chapter 2. Yujito was waiting on the rooftop of a medium-sized building. The sun was just starting to set on the hidden leaf and she got a pretty good view of it happening. It didn't have anything on cloud, which had a setting sun turn a blank swath of white cloud into a toiling ocean of orange-pink radiance. The leaves had trees, though. She liked them. They were a plus. A heavy impact hit the roof behind her. She knew it was the rakage just as a child would know a parent's footsteps. Although it would be quite a stretch to call him a father figure, he was a constant in her life. One of the few. Yujito turned around to him as slowly as she could. A heavy frown marred her face. What were you thinking? She spat out. His face was steely. He normally wasn't like that. Whenever someone refused his orders or insulted him without reason, he was more likely to get into a shouting match, which would very likely end up with the opposing party with a few smashed ribs, rather than the detached veneer of someone disinterested in another's plight. I made the decision almost 17 years ago. I did what I thought I had to do for the good of Kumo. His voice was moderate and reasoned, a far cry from the usual. Regardless, you can offer someone else up for the job, because I'm not doing it. Yujito. Nope. I refuse. Yujito snarled out. I have been a loyal ninja to Kumo for as long as I have lived. And for what? My childhood ruined. My adolescence ruined. Christ, things have only just started to get better for me. And you want to do this? I've trained until everything hurts. I've borne the hatred of the village. I've lied, killed, and stole for the good of the village, and this is how you repay me? By just shucking me away like a useless noble with a penchant for linen rather than steel? No, I refuse. AI didn't do anything for a very long time, and when he did, it shocked Yujito to the core. He got down to his knees, touched his forehead to the cold, dirty ground, and said, I'm sorry. Yujito stared at him with wide eyes. It was like watching a rabbit try to hunt a bear. Completely foreign, confusing, and somewhat pitiable to watch. News of the fourth Hokage having a baby reached me at a time when my brother was just getting used to being a Jinchuriki. In all honesty, I still didn't trust the demon containers. There were others available to the job, others that were more within the age range, but I wanted you gone. I thought I would have too much on my hands trying to get my brother to stay with me without having to worry about you as well. If it went well, we had an easy ally that took care of a problem Jinchuriki, and if it went bad, we had all the justification and rallying cry needed for war. This thinking was wrong, and I apologized. Yujito gulped. It was difficult seeing him like that. Rise, she said. Ai got up from the ground and stared at her with the same steely expression as before. Yujito pursed her lips and looked to the side. So what's the plan then? Kill them all? Make it look like it was the one with the black hair. Ai walked up to her and planted a single hand on her shoulder. I want you to try. Yujito's brows furrowed in confusion. What? Ai's eyes went half-lidded as he looked away at the sunset. It's pretty, isn't it? Doesn't have anything on Kumo, but still, it's pretty. Yujito followed his gaze. What? She repeated. Ai sighed. When I was younger, the only thing I wanted to do was to go to war. Expand our influence, and power, and bring stability to the world. Now, all I want is for peace. So no, I don't want you to kill anyone. I want you to try. Yujito's face soured. You really want me to get married? Play the wife? Play the happy woman who waves at the ninja of clouds? She shook her head. No, I really do. I don't want you to play, I said, cutting her off. I don't want you to pretend to do anything. I want you to try. Earnestly. Really. With all your might, I want you to try. Ai paused for a bit to let what he said sink in, then said, I know you don't have any friends back in Kumo. Or any romantic prospects, or any real attachment to our home other than your sense of duty. If it doesn't work out, I'll try to convince the others that another choice would be better. Ai turned to look her in the eye. But if I find out you didn't try 100%, I'll demote you to a genin. Yujito pursed her lips again. Matatabi had been strangely silent. She didn't know if the cat was asleep, or just formulating a deep and inquisitive response, but she really needed that cat's advice right about now. She'd try. She owed Ai that much. Anything else was out of the question, however. She didn't do seduction missions and she didn't do prostitute missions. Yujito was a proud ninja of the hidden cloud. She'd do her mission as it was assigned. No more, no less. Gaara found his sister at the top branch of a tree overlooking Konoha. He floated up to her, and they stood, side by side, for a few minutes in complete and utter silence. I'm sorry, Gaara said finally, breaking the silence. Temari sighed a deep sigh. It's fine, I guess. Gaara turned to look at his sister a bit more seriously. You're taking this better than I thought you would. Temari shrugged. Everything's going to implode in on itself anyway. There's no way this could be sustainable. What upsets me the most is that you didn't even tell me beforehand. Gaara looked down at his feet. Because of me, everybody was scared of approaching you. Not everybody, that one fellow seemed nice, but... Gaara trailed off. You didn't have any friends or crushes or dates or anything else. All because of me. I drove everybody away from you and Kankuro. Temari turned to look at her brother more seriously. Wait. You're doing this because... Do you want me to date your best friend? Not going to lie, that's pretty twisted. Gaara sighed. Father was the one who signed out the marriage contract in the first place. I got an eagle from Konoha saying that there were copies of not only yours, but 3 others in Konoha as well, and was invited to the negotiations. Granted, I could have refused, but... Naruto's been through a lot. He's just like me, and you to a greater extent. I think you two would work well together. And I never really liked Shikamaru. Temari thought back to all her interactions with the blonde-haired Uzumaki. They weren't that favorable. He was brash and bold and didn't think things through. He ran into situations instead of evaluating them. He may have grown from a pipsqueak into a rather well-built teenager, but his mind doesn't change so readily. I'll stick with it until it explodes. Don't expect me to leap into harm's way to protect him or anything. As soon as shit gets tilted, I'm out. Gaara closed his mouth. Fair enough. Try to keep an open mind though. I think this could work out. Temari huffed. I doubt it. Kuratsuchi didn't get very far before her grandfather flew behind her and tapped a finger between her shoulder blades. She fell to the floor with nary a grunt as the force of gravity on her body tripled over the course of half a second. Once she was on the ground, she was huffing and puffing for air. The force of gravity on her chest made it a struggle to even expand her sternum. Anoki sighed and lifted his finger, releasing the gravity technique. Kuratsuchi pushed up from the ground and started heaping in great amounts of oxygen to her lungs. Once she was full of breath, she glared at her grandfather. Why? You know why? No. I don't. Konoha killed my mom, your daughter-in-law. I don't want shit to do with them if I can help it. Then you go and marry me off to a fucking Jinchuriki of the leaf. So if you have something in that infinite pile of Viagra and wisdom you call a brain, please enlighten me. Anoki lighted on the ground. His full height was barely taller than her when she was on her ass. Don't think I don't have my fair share of a grudge against Konoha. If you can't recall, I was in every single shinobi war, and in every single one of them, we were pitted against each other. I've killed my fair share of leaves, and the leaves have killed their fair share of my friends and family. So why this? We should be thinking of ways to get rid of them for good. Is this marriage thing a ploy or something? Anoki's perpetual frown deepened until it looked like his face was split in two. When I first signed that treaty, we were just out of another war. This one claimed your mother's life. By that time, I had already seen too many of my friends and family die. I don't want there to be another war. I don't want to lose you, or my son. But why can't it be someone else? You're not going to be the third for much longer. When you die, I'm just going to be the granddaughter of a dead guy. Everything will work out fine. Look, I'm not asking you to fall in love with him, or bear his children, or to even like him. Just don't kill him. And you probably shouldn't try to piss him off either. You're right. He is a Jinchuriki, after all. Kuratsuchi frowned and looked off to the side. Does Dad know about this? I informed him, yes. You're not really giving me much of a choice in this. Fine, I won't kill him. The trees are a nice change of pace, after all. Might as well try to have fun. Kuratsuchi stood up and went to follow the secretary's chakra signature. She might have been overreacting before. It wasn't like the treaty was going to last. At worst, she would be kicking back in the hidden leaf for a year or so. Before she went off after Shizen, she turned around and said one last thing. Oh, and if he comes on to me, I'm gelding him. Just so you know. Fu stepped trepidatiously into the doorway. The house was pretty big. Not exactly a mansion or anything, but there were enough bedrooms at least. Well, almost enough. 5 rooms for 6 people. She wouldn't mind roughing it though. A couch was always better than the bundle of leaves she called a mattress. The house looked like no one had ever lived inside of it. Fu almost expected a real estate agent to poke a head through a door and greet her with a patently fake smile. Or she would if she had a more whole understanding of the real estate market. Shizen shifted nervously behind her. It's part of a housing development in Konoha. No one ever bought it, so as long as you're in Konoha, it's your home. Fu looked at her with a confused look on her face. As long as I'm in Konoha? Doesn't it belong to me even when I'm out? Oh, sorry. Not like mine. Like partial ownership. I guess it would have to be a 6-way split. Shizen waited a beat to see if she would continue. I don't understand the question. Fu jumped onto the couch in the living room and tested its springiness. Well, I am a member of your village now. Shizen just looked even more confused. I'm sorry? Fu looked around. Is that not how it works? I know it doesn't happen that much, but people from different villages do marry every now and then. Turns into a whole thing. They get dual citizenship. Do I not get that too? Come to think of it, do I get multi-citizenship? Why, you're right. I didn't think of that. I think the fine details of the treaty are being worked out right now, but I can't imagine you wouldn't get the same treatment as any other political marriage. Fu went up the bookshelves in the living room and started skimming through the spines. Did I say something wrong? Sorry, I don't talk to people much. I'm not the most social of animals. I can insult people without meaning to sometimes. No, of course not. Why do you say that? Fu turned around to look at her more fully. Because you stutter a lot when you're talking to me. When I bring up difficult subjects, the tendons on your neck get really pronounced. Especially when I bring up my husband, you get particularly fidgety. Did I do something wrong? Shizen bit her lower lip and shifted her weight awkwardly from foot to foot. Naruto's important to me and my master. I don't agree with her decision to continue on with this marriage thing against all of the wishes of the ones most directly involved. I don't want him to get hurt, and you're... well... and I'm married to him now. Fu stared blankly. Shizen cringed a little bit. You can say that so glibly. Fu looked around confusedly. Well, it is true. You don't. You're okay with this? You're okay with being married to someone against your will? Fu shrugged. Wouldn't be the worst thing that's ever happened to me. He seems. Well, it was a little bit hard to get a read on him. He was pretty shaken up. But at least he doesn't seem like a bad guy, you know? He's a very kind person. Once he decides you're important to him, he won't let go of you. He'll help you even if it means getting a hand thrust through his chest, or standing up to a monster that he has no hope of beating. Fu smiled. That's great then. He sounds awesome. He looked kinda cool too. Fu nodded, more to herself than anything. Yeah, this sounds fine. Shizen faltered for a moment. You're okay with sharing him? With 4 other women? Fu shrugged. Nothing's perfect. Besides, the other 4 didn't seem too fond of him. I guess that older one did, but she seemed a bit aloof? Is that the right word? Whatever. Shizen sighed and looked down. At least this one didn't appear to be dangerous. She couldn't say the same for the older blonde and the younger raven-haired. She'd met Temari before and could say that she at least wasn't one to get riled up. As for Mei, there was a knock at the door, bringing Shizen out of her mind. She berated herself in her head for being so lost in thought as to not notice the creeping chakra signature and went to answer the door. Before she had a chance to answer it, the knob turned on its own and Yujito stepped inside with a disinterested gaze as she scanned the house. She turned to Shizen. Is there a dojo here, or do I have to go to a training ground to do my daily exercises? Shizen nodded quickly without missing a beat. Being nice to the visiting shinobi was important, after all. Yes, there is a small dojo in the house. Do you want me to show it to Y? Yujito shook her head. That will be fine. Where is my assigned room? There are no assigned rooms. You and everyone else will just have to figure it out amongst yourselves, I suppose. One of the corners of her mouth tilted downwards. She had a feeling there was going to be a lot of arguing over those rooms. I see. Hey! Fu said excitedly as she ran up to the militaristic woman. I'm Fu, it's nice to meet you. She thrust a hand forward, only enhancing her look of elation. One of Yujito's eyebrows raised slowly. I'm Yujito, she said, gingerly taking the younger girl's hand in her own, almost like she was handling something either dangerous or disgusting. Fu leaned forward a little bit. Yujito. Yujito was a bit confused. What? Fu's head cocked to the side. You don't have a last name? Yujito planted a single step backwards. That girl had no idea of what a personal space bubble was. Yes, I do. It's Ni. It's only polite to offer your full name before expecting someone else to do the same, after all. There was an edge in her voice, clearly annoyed by the girl's social faux pas. But I did. My name's Fu. Just Fu. Oh, is that a cultural trait of hidden waterfall mononyms? Nope. Yujito waited a few seconds for Fu to elaborate on that, but when nothing came, nodded to herself, almost like she was expecting it, and started walking past her. See you in the morning, I guess. Oh, wait, you're a Jinchuriki, right? Yujito paused and looked down on the girl. Yes, I am. I'm the host of the Two-Tailed Demon Death Cat. Fu said with a small amount of wonder. That's a pretty cool title. I've just got the Seven-Tailed Beetle. His name's Chomei. He's pretty cool. Yujito looked the girl up and down a few times. The happy-go-lucky types never sat well with her. They were always too unpredictable. Right, Yujito said while nodding. Matatabi is pretty cool too. Now, it's late and I want to. Is this where I'm supposed to be? Yujito, Fu, and Shizen turned to look as Temari walked in through the door with a careful expression. Ah, guess it is. Where's my room? We have to figure it out amongst ourselves, Yujito said. Right. Temari looked around. Food? She asked. I haven't had anything to eat yet. The refrigerator is stocked, Shizen said. Great, Temari said hungrily, making a beeline to the larder. Yujito was fine going to bed as she was, but if there was tasty food to be had, she had no excuse for not being a part of it. Fu just followed the two of them as they made their way to the fridge. I'm sure Tsunade needs me, Shizen said, making her way to the door. Please don't do anything terrible to this house. Right, Temari said, only half listening as she opened the fridge. Fu's face lit up like a Christmas tree when she beheld its contents. There was ham, chicken, eggs, beef, fruits and vegetables, sauces and condiments, and everything and anything she could never afford but had always wanted. Temari clicked her tongue. I guess it is a bit too much to ask for leftovers. What? Fu exclaimed boisterously. How can you be upset by this? This is so awesome. There's, like, pig and cow and chicken and ketchup. Freaking ketchup. And there's a whole bottle of it. Fu bolted forward, grabbed a hold of the leg of ham, and slapped it on the table behind them. We're going to eat this. No, Yujito said, grabbing the meat just as quickly as it was out and putting it back in the refrigerator. Do you know how long it takes to prepare meat of this size? It's already around 9. I don't want to be up until midnight helping you cook food. Fu crossed her arms over her chest. Then I'll make it myself. Do you even know how to operate an oven? Yeah. Okay, prove it. Fu stomped her way to the oven and stared at the buttons for a few seconds. Then a few more seconds. Finally, she carefully pushed the big one on the side, only for it to beep out at her in protest. Erg, Fu growled, starting to push buttons on the screen wantonly. Why doesn't this work? Yujito grabbed an apple from the fridge and bit into it. Because it's proven against children and people who don't know how to use ovens, she said after swallowing the first bite. If you really want it that bad, I'll help you out tomorrow. For now, just try to get something simple for yourself. Fu puffed her cheeks and groaned, but eventually relented. There was so much wonderful food in there, and she had to settle for something simple? That wasn't fair. Not even a little bit. The door banged open and Kuratsuchi walked in with one hand rubbing her shoulders and back. Is this where I'm staying? Nice duds. Hey, Fu said excitedly. Wanna make some ham? Kuratsuchi's eyebrows knit together. What, like leg of ham? No way, that'll take way too long. Plus, I'm not even hungry. Fu deflated. How about tomorrow then? Kuratsuchi shrugged. I dunno, she said as she walked to where she assumed the stairs would be. Oh, and I've got dibs on the biggest room. Once she was out of earshot, Temari leaned against the countertop and crossed her arms over her chest. That's a bit of a switch of character, huh? Yujito nodded. Sorry, what was your name again? Temari of the desert. You. Yujito ni. And I'm Fu, Fu said, rushing forward to offer her hand. Temari took it on her own with a half-smile. Nice to meet you, hopefully we'll get along for as long as this lasts. Oh? Yujito asked. What's that supposed to mean? Temari's eyebrows rose. You're kidding, right? There's no way this lasts longer than a week. Either someone's going to try to kill someone else, the populace will riot, or… I don't know, something. Now that I think about it, you didn't look too happy about this either. Why are you suddenly okay with it? Yujito breathed out slowly. I'm not okay with it, but I said he's not going to force me to do anything I don't want to do. So, I'm trying. Trying? Yujito shrugged. Mostly, I'll just do my best not to hurt anyone. Apparently AI really wants peace. Temari nodded. Huh, so does my brother. Both of them stood there for a few seconds before what they processed truly sunk in. Wait, Yujito said slowly. She turned to Fu. What about Shibuki? What does he want out of this? Fu shrugged. I don't know. It was kind of a surprise. He was always a pacifist, though. I don't think he has ulterior motives. So, Temari turned to look at where Kuratsuchi went off to. On the presumption that you two are telling the truth, that means that Cloud really does want peace. Sand really wants peace. Waterfall really wants peace. Mei needs the money for her nation, so she wants peace too. Konoha wants peace, because come on, they always do. Rock is really the only variable we don't know about here. They've always been warmongers, Fu quipped. I'm sure they say the same about Konoha, Yujito said. Temari cupped her chin in morbid thought. Then that means… The door opened again to show Mei walking in sedately. She quickly noticed the three in the kitchen and walked over to them. Hello? Has everyone claimed their rooms yet? Fu said uncertainty. What was her name again? Kuratsuchi, Temari said. She said she was claiming the biggest room. We haven't been up there yet. So go ahead. Maybe later. Is there anything appetizing in the refrigerator? Mei asked as she opened it up. Nothing ready to go, Temari said. Mei was already reaching in for the eggs, milk, and ketchup by the time Temari finished speaking. Surely you're capable of making something for yourself? Well, yeah, Temari said indignantly. It's late is all. That's no excuse, Mei said, putting a pan on the stove and setting it to medium-high. What are you making? Fu asked. May grabbed a bowl out of one of the cupboards and started mixing the eggs and the milk together. An omelette, she said. Oh, can I have one? Of course, May said with a smile. Temari leaned next to Yujito while the other two were busy conversing. There's a chance that this could be permanent, couldn't it? Yujito toyed around with the notion a few times in her head. Fuck. Naruto was in a dark room. He tried to turn on the lights, but the electricity had been cut off. That was okay though, he could see the room he was in fairly well from the light of the moon coming in through the main window. His chest was gripped with confusion and sorrow at what he saw, or more accurately to say, what he didn't see. All of his furniture was gone. His pictures and their frames, his plates, his chairs, his bed, even his clothes from off of their hangers. And he'd spent so long getting the place in immaculate shape before he left with Jiraiya. Now it is all gone. There were even little outlines on the ground from the change of worn to not worn flooring that showed exactly where the articles had been. That had to be the worst part of it. That he could just barely make out what might have been what was supposed to happen. Naruto sat down on the hardwood floor and cupped his chin in his hands. His room had a good view of the monument, and now that was all that the room had. He had nothing left. He didn't know how long he had been sitting in the emptiness of his apartment, but it was long enough to see the sun set and the moon change slightly in position. The door to his apartment opened up. It wasn't an intruder. If it had been, he wouldn't have heard the footsteps coming up behind him. They were heavy and made the floors creak under their weight. Hey Naruto, Jiraiya said with uncharacteristic sameness in his voice. You okay? Naruto sighed into his hands. I don't even know what I don't know. Jiraiya sighed as well and sat down next to him. Apparently, the fourth Hokage signed different documents before you were born that put you into an arranged marriage with 4 other girls from 4 nations, all hoping for a political marriage with his unborn son. Tsunade thinks it was because he was doing paperwork with shadow clones and the proposals all came at the same time. About 2 months ago, Inoki unearthed his and brought it forward to Tsunade. When they looked for the copy kept in Konoha, they realized that there were 3 others. She sent word out to the other 3 nations without expecting an answer back, and got one from all 3. May, the new Mizukage, got wind of it and put herself forward as a marriage candidate. They'd been figuring out the details for about a week now before you showed up. Naruto took a second to absorb and dissect the information dump heaped on his head. There was one thing that stuck out in particular. Something that wasn't accounted for. But why me? Why sign that before I was even born? Jiraiya took a deep breath and let it out as slowly as he could. That wasn't something he'd wanted to bring up ever, if it could be helped. He was going to figure it out eventually, especially with all the diplomatic bullshit going on, so no time like the present to rip off a band-aid. The reason why is because the 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze. Well, he was your father. Naruto was deathly silent for a fairly long time before looking up to Jiraiya with his eyebrows scrunched up. What? He asked. Jiraiya sighed, but said nothing more. But that doesn't make any sense. Why would he put the Kyuubi in me? Why did I have to live like an orphan? Why didn't anyone tell me? Naruto shouted the last part out, tears flinging from his cheeks. This can't be real. This has to be an illusion, or something. Jiraiya patted him on the shoulder. Small, silent sobs started to rack Naruto's chest. No one really knows what happened during your birth. The only thing we know for certain is that the Kyuubi got out, and your parents killed themselves protecting, sealing, and saving you from it. The reason the 3rd and I never told you was because… well, let's just say that your father racked up a lot of enemies in his lifetime. You would have been in danger. And also, I think your father would have preferred it this way. He would have wanted you to be seen for yourself, instead of the son of a hero. Everyone only saw me as a monster, Naruto spat out bitterly. Jiraiya looked down on Naruto more seriously. Naruto, listen to me. Minato, your father, could have resealed the Kyuubi back into your mother, but he didn't. He could have sealed it into something temporarily so that I could dispose of it properly, but he didn't. He could have done any number of things that didn't involve you with the Kyuubi, but he didn't. He sealed it into you. I think it's because he saw something that day. I think he had a plan when he put the Kyuubi in you. Naruto was silent for a few seconds. Resealed? It was in my mom before me? Jiraiya grimaced. Yes, you're the 3rd Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. The first one was Mito, the wife of the 1st Hokage, and the second one was your mother. Naruto sniffled loudly and wiped the tears from his eyes with the cuffs of his shirt. My mom. What was she like? Jiraiya leaned back, propped up by the palms of his hands on the hardwood floor, and gazed at the monument faced with Naruto. She was a terrific woman, he said with a smile. I think you mostly take after her. She was brash and bold, she didn't take no for an answer, she loved you more than the world. Naruto opened the door to the well-sized house as slowly as he could. Emotionally, he felt like shit, and he was tired enough to want to fall asleep on the nearest soft-looking surface. Even so, he made sure his steps were silent and that his grumbles remained within his head. He didn't know if the others were in the house yet, but it was always better to err on the side of caution, especially when dealing with emotionally charged females with a wide array of potentially lethal ninja techniques. He made a beeline for the couch. The pervy sage said that there were 5 bedrooms and he didn't want to risk opening a door he shouldn't. Besides, it wasn't like the couch was the worst option for a sleeping surface. And walking up to it, it looked surprisingly lived in and comfortable. From the scarce lighting, he could see irregular pillows under a woolen blanket. Has Shizen already set something up for him? That was nice of her. If only he noticed the slight movement underneath the blanket indicating breathing. Or the mop of green hair poking out the end. Because if he did, he might have reconsidered falling down on top of it face first, trying to enjoy the sensation of a free fall into the comfortable cushiony embrace of a welcoming bed. What he got instead was landing on the bony body of a teenager underneath a thin blanket. Fu shrieked, punched and kneed him in the chest and gut, scrambled out from under him, and called her signature technique, double water swords, to her hands. Naruto grunted, first from the surprise then from the pain, and slipped off from the couch, cradling his torso and trying to get air back in his lungs. The entirety of Fu's eyes had turned orange, a sign of her chakra getting mixed into her body, and her breath was ragged and full of adrenaline. As she realized what had happened, the orange of her eyes leaked back into place, and her breathing normalized. What the hell? Naruto hissed out. That girl packed a hell of a punch. I should be asking that. Fu yelled out in a harsh whisper. What did you do? I didn't know anyone was on the couch. Naruto whispered back as he slowly got to his feet. Fu dispelled her water swords and sat down in a nearby chair. You're a ninja, right? You should have noticed. Her voice mellowed out into a soft utterance. Naruto pulled himself onto the couch in a sitting position and rubbed his sore chest. I've been having a day, alright? And why were you on the couch to begin with? Fu shrugged. There are only 5 rooms. Someone has to. Yeah, and it's usually the guy that does that. Or at least the last person who walks in the house. Fu crossed her arms over her chest. I was trying to be nice. You didn't look like you were having a good day when I saw you. Looked like you could use a soft bed. Naruto closed his eyes and let his breathing return to normal. That's it. Thanks. But I'm not the only one. You're not having the best day either, are you? Fu shrugged again. I've had worse. You too, right? I mean, you did just get married to 5 beautiful women, one of which is a bodaciously awesome person. Fu smiled at the last part, putting it in as soon as she thought of it with a thumb pointed in her direction and a bubbly smirk. Naruto smiled too, even if it was a bit strained. At least someone thinks so. And yeah, I think you're right. This isn't the worst day I've ever had. I've just gotta think positively. Fu nodded appreciatively and a small, somewhat tense silence fell over them. Well, Fu said, putting her hands on her knees and standing up. First things first, my name's Fu. Nice to meet you. She extended her hand out to him. Naruto smiled and clasped her hand on his own. Nice to meet you too. And thanks, I guess, for not killing me. Can't say the same for the others. Naruto muttered the last sentence under his breath, though Fu still heard it. She sat down next to him. They're not that bad. Yujito's nice. A bit cold, but she's nice deep down. Temari's pragmatic, I guess. Mei's. She's honestly a bit scary. Scary in a good way, though, if that makes sense. And I haven't talked to Kuratsuchi yet. But I don't think you have to worry about her. She's more bark than bite, I can tell. Naruto smiled tiredly. And you? Are nice. Nicer than you should be. Fu punched him lightly and unsurely on the elbow. She wasn't sure if that show of affection was too familiar or not. We are going to be seeing a lot of each other. We might as well make things good, right? Naruto smiled, this time a tad bit more sincerely. Yeah, you're right. What's all the racket? Naruto and Fu whipped around to see Yujito walking out of the hallway as silently as a cat. That was kind of a delayed response, Fu said. The ruckus happened about a minute ago. Yujito stopped in front of the couch with her arms crossed over her chest. Oh, I was awake the second he walked in the door. I'd been listening to your conversation and decided to introduce myself. So here I am. Yujito-ni, pleased to make your acquaintance. Yeah? I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Likewise. Yujito leaned back and looked towards the kitchen, where she read the clock off of the oven. Shit, only midnight. Srom? Fu asked. Yujito smirked. I think you actually won the lottery with the couch, because our friend from Rock snores like you wouldn't believe. I barely fell asleep when you walked in. Ah. Sorry, Naruto said helplessly. I didn't mean to. Yujito walked to the chair Fu had been occupying previously and sat down. That's alright. It gives us a chance to talk. I was a bit brash before in the office and I apologize for that. This isn't a good scenario for anyone to be in, and my acting like a child only made it worse. You don't seem like a bad person, but in our industry, looks can be deceiving. So I'll make this as clear as I can be right from the start. We're now married, but for all intents and purposes those are just words. They hold no meaning. I don't know you and you don't know me. You aren't entitled to anything from me. If you try something that I deem inappropriate, I will not hesitate to react in a most brutal and redemptive way. Do I make myself clear? Naruto sat stock still for a few seconds before leaning over to Fu slightly and whispering, You sure she's nice deep down? Fu broke into a chortle and Naruto quickly followed. That is, until there were razor-sharp, outstretched fingernails scraping his jugular. Yujito's face hadn't changed at all, even in the position of her practically threatening his life. I'm glad you find it funny. I do not. I just want to emphasize my position in this manner. The fingernails retracted, allowing Naruto to breathe without the fear of accidentally cutting open his neck. Without another word edgewise, Yujito walked back down the hallway and further into the house out of sight. It was like the darkness enveloped her. Are you sure she's not the scary one? Naruto asked quietly. Fu shrugged. At least she's helping me cook up ham for dinner tomorrow. Naruto's eyebrows furrowed. Ham? Fu's face got an electric smile. Yeah. There's so much food in the fridge, including a whole ham leg. And there's an oven too. Making it's going to be so easy. And trust me, I should know. I tried to cook a pig over a wood fire once. It went terribly. Open fire isn't good for big meat. Naruto laughed despite the situation he was in. This might be hard to deal with, but at least one of them was nice. Two figures cloaked in black suits of red clouds looked out over the walls of the great hidden leaf from a vantage point far away. One was short, wide, and shuffled around to get to where he needed to go. The other was tall, somewhat lanky, and had a ponytail of blonde hair peeking out of his outfit. This complicates matters, Deidara muttered. What should we do? We only need to get the Kazekage, right? Sasori's throat rumbled with dissatisfaction. There are other kages to consider as well. Along with the two Jinchuriki. We won't win if we go with a frontal attack. We should pull back for now. But Sasori, my man, you just said the solution to the problem. We won't win with a frontal assault. So, we go a different route. Sasori glanced up to his partner. Are you sure you'll be able to contain yourself? Deidara smiled predatorily. It's not about containment. It's about letting loose at just the right moment. Chapter 3. Naruto didn't get very much sleep. There were a lot of reasons for that, the most obvious one being that he didn't even get to his new home until midnight. The second most obvious was because he didn't want to brave the darkness of the halls and risk running into the crazy super sharp nail lady and risking his genitalia, so he pulled a few somewhat uncomfortable chairs together and slept on them opposite Fu. However, the third most obvious reason why he didn't get much sleep was the thing that kept him up the longest, strangely enough, and it was him doing something he usually didn't like doing. Thinking. And the more he thought about his situation, the more scared he got. It got to the point where he was planning out how to approach Tsunade, when to approach her, and what to say to her in order to do anything from getting someone else to replace him, all the way to maybe just a roundtable bodyguard system in place. Futile as it might have been, and even he knew it was, he was mostly doing that to actively not think about the huge bombshell that was dropped on his head by his mentor. He was the son of Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, and Kushina Uzumaki, the second Jinchuriki? Well, that explained the whisker marks at least. On one hand, it was nice knowing who his parents were, but on the other, every time he thought about it, more questions just popped up in his head like molehills. His brain was eating away at itself trying to make justifications for any of the reasons why he had to suffer, and it just couldn't. Nothing that made sense anyway. And thus, he only truly fell asleep around the 4 o'clock mark. Unluckily enough for him, Temari was a morning person, and she didn't get much sleep either thanks to a certain lady ninja from rock belting away through her nasal cavities. So around 5 o'clock, he awoke to the sound and smells of bacon sizzling on a pan in the kitchen that was directly across from the living room. 1 hour of sleep a happy man does not make. Naruto sat up, smacking his lips together to get the feeling of sleep bile off his tongue, and immediately winced. The morning sunrise was in perfect view of the living room window, and also at the perfect height where it blinded him sitting up. He tumbled off the couch and walked over to the kitchen, where Temari was poking at the strips of meat. "Hey Temari," he muttered as he nosed through the fridge. She was wearing felt pajamas with patterns of weasels flying around on it. "Hey Naruto," she replied flatly. "Want me to throw a few strips on for you too?" She was asking more out of politeness rather than intimacy. "Yeah," he said quickly, still blinking the light out of his eyes. "Thanks." "Don't mention it," she said slowly as she reached for more pig meat. The pan's sizzling exploded in intensity when she put the new ones on. "Are you a morning person too?" she asked. Naruto shook his head emphatically. "Nope. Didn't sleep well." Temari nodded knowingly. Someone needs to get that girl some sleep plugs or something." Naruto's face scrunched in confusion. "What?" "No, I mean, I was sleeping over there," he pointed to the bed he was using as a sleep surface. "I was awake because... stuff." "Stuff, huh?" Temari asked in an almost mocking tone. "Because that's not vague." "I was thinking, okay? You weren't?" Temari shrugged, putting the pieces of bacon that were ready for consumption on a plate with a paper towel on it. "I was trying to blot out the sounds of a lion's death throes coming from Kuratsuchi's room. But yes, I guess that contributed to it." Naruto sighed and leaned against the counter. "We're married now, aren't we? That's so weird to think about. I should be freaking out right now." "Don't," Temari warned. "It's not like this is real or anything. Not like real reality. If I had to guess, it would probably be just a stamped paper and nothing else. I'm sure it's all ceremonial." "So does that mean... can we see other people?" Naruto asked, his hopes starting to raise. If that were to be the case, then political marriage would mean nothing to him, not really. He could still date Sakura, save Sasuke, and become the Hokage without any problems. Temari paused and stared at the bacon. Traditionally, it wasn't uncommon for both spouses in a political marriage to be able to take lovers aside from their partners, but the way Tsunade described their marriage made it seem like it was going to be broadcasted all across the world as a message of peace to tie all the nations together. Would they be able to see other people? "Maybe," she replied noncommittally. "May might know." She went back to Kage administration shortly, meeting up with the rest of them the night before. Naruto yawned widely. "Well, I don't really know you that well, but at least you don't look crazy. That makes 2 out of 5. "2?" Temari asked. Naruto nodded. "Yeah, you and Fu. Have you met the other 3? Naruto tapped his finger to his chin. "What is the cloud chick's name? Started with a U." "Yujito?" Naruto nodded. "Yeah, her. She threatened to kill me if I came on to her. So I'm going to have to put her down on the try not to interact with much list." Temari giggled. "Doesn't that mean you just have to not act like an asshole?" Naruto touched his throat around where her knife-like nails had been last night. Perhaps he wasn't explaining it properly. "I guess," Naruto replied helplessly. "Sometimes it is better to accept defeat and move on with a conversation." He learned that from Jiraiya, though admittedly, the roles were usually reversed. The sounds of shuffled stomping came from the hallway. Kuratsuchi poked her head through to the kitchen with bleary eyes and midway through a large yawn when she realized it was occupied by both Naruto and Temari. Her yawn turned into a smirk. "Hey loverboy," she said sleepily. It was obvious that she was being condescending rather than playful. Even Naruto knew that. He just scrunched his eyebrows and looked at her confusedly. "What was your name again?" He knew better than anyone that someone dismissing a call for attention was the worst feeling possible when one was seeking it. Her smirk turned into a light frown. "Kuratsuchi," she almost spat out as she shuffled over to where the drawers were and started raiding them for cereal. "So what does breakfast usually look like in Rock, Kuratsuchi?" Temari asked disinterestedly. "Cereal and field rations." "No bacon?" Naruto asked, munching through a strip as Temari added a few more to the pan. She brought out the fixings for cereal and started up her usual breakfast with the ease and grace of a person who had been doing it for years. Look, as much as I'd like to play house with you all, I think I'll pass. I've got things to do, places to go, people to see, and all that jazz. And I don't want to do it with you. Naruto snorted. What do you have to do? You're not on a mission, are you? She smiled at him with an over-exaggerated sweetness. That's confidential, honey. A tick mark formed on Naruto's forehead, but he didn't respond to her. It's not like it really mattered what she was doing, but just the way she responded to him got on his nerves. Way more than Sasuke ever had, that was for sure. Yujito walked in so silently that Naruto wasn't even sure how long she'd been standing there, just that when he took a step back, he nearly bumped into her. Ever the dexterous type, she sidestepped him and grabbed a piece of bacon from the bacon plate without making a sound. Whoa, Naruto said appreciatively. You're like a cat. Yujito practically growled as she gave him the stink eye. Was that you trying to be funny? Naruto looked from side to side a few times. What? No, I just didn't even know you were there. You move like a cat. It's because, Fu said from the couch and paused to take a yawn. She's the Jinchuriki of Matatabi, the two-tailed demon death cat. You know cats? Oh, Naruto said in realization. Yujito leveled a hard stare at him. You didn't know that? Naruto sighed. It was too early in the morning for this. Nope, I didn't Ms. Ill kill you if you try anything. Yujito shrugged. I will. Yeah, I know you will. The point is, that's not how you're supposed to introduce yourself to someone you're meeting for the first time. Even I know that. Temari looked over at everyone. Am I the only one who brought a second pair of clothes? Indeed, everyone was wearing what they had come into the house with, and all the clothing was slightly rumpled, indicating they'd been sleeping in, with the slight exception of Naruto, who had taken off his jacket. Naruto shrugged helplessly. I don't know where they took my stuff. Kuratsuchi started paying attention to the conversation. Wait, you're a fan of orange tracksuits, right? Naruto nodded slowly, already dreading the answer. Yeah. Kuratsuchi pointed her spoon at him. I think I might have slept in your room. There were a bunch of those in the closet, she said through a mouthful of ninja-s. Naruto leaned against the countertop. That's one mystery solved. Oh, wait a minute. Does that mean the penguin sleeping cap was yours too? Naruto nodded. I didn't know my honey was such a softie, Kuratsuchi said in a baby voice. The tick mark returned with a vengeance. And I didn't know that, my dearest. Don't. Temari warned. She's just trying to get a rise out of you. Naruto took a deep breath. He might have been able to deal with the situation better if he had gotten more sleep. Too bad that didn't happen. Kuratsuchi just sat back with a smirk on her face and continued eating her cereal. He already really fucking hated her, and could already tell they were going to get along like C4 and an electric charge. Fu tumbled out of the couch, clearly mumbling too early. You're a ninja, Yujito said sternly. You should be able to get out of bed at a moment's notice. I can, Fu said defensively. But what kind of masochist wants to wake up at 5 o'clock? Temari, Kuratsuchi, and Yujito all raised their hands. Fu pouted at them. I'm surrounded by weirdos. Hear, hear, Naruto said, making Fu huff a few breaths of laughter out. Is that bacon I smell? Mei asked, obscured by the hallway. Yeah, Naruto said emphatically, going for another slice. It's really good tea. He didn't get the last part out because his windpipe suddenly got obstructed with semi-chewed pieces of bacon. The reason for this was from the involuntary gasp when he saw what Mei was wearing. Or wasn't wearing, for lack of a better term. Because Mei was a woman who was used to sleeping and living alone, she had thus not packed suitable sleeping attire that covered her body very effectively. She had also forgotten to put her normal clothes back on that morning. Basically, she was wearing a nightie so sheer that it was encroaching on lingerie levels. Yujito started patting Naruto on the back to help get the meat out of his throat while he hacked away. Kuratsuchi whistled appreciatively. Is that part of it too? She asked slowly, pointing her spoon at the two memories. It seemed Mei didn't hear that snippet as she approached and opened the fridge like she wasn't practically naked. Fu was staring at Mei the whole time as she did it with wide eyes. Temari spared a glance, made a sound like a mixture of a huff and a scoff, and went back to her cooking. It was an obvious ploy for attention, especially from the only male variety in the house, who was just starting to cough out the rest of the bacon stuck in his lungs. How old was she? Shouldn't she be acting more mature? As soon as Naruto was done coughing, he stood up straight and made sure to divert attention away from Mei. Even so, his face was a dangerous shade of red and there was a major threat of nosebleed. His constitution wasn't so low that he'd pop a boner at the mere mention of sexuality, but he was afraid of what might happen if he stayed there. Right, he coughed into his hand as he beheld the contours of the counter. Well, I'm going to talk to Granny. She's probably up by now. Mei's face scrunched up in worry. And what about breakfast? It's the most important meal of the day, you know. Naruto nodded, still refusing to look at her. He didn't trust his eyes not to wander, and he also didn't want to set a bad first impression on the people he had a feeling he was going to be seeing a lot of. Oh yeah, I know. I'll get something more satisfying on the way, he said on his way to the door. 6:30 a.m. Tsunade groaned as she stretched her back out. She'd been hunched over her work for so long that when she tried to bend the other way, there were audible cracks as her vertebrae sorted themselves back out. She was getting too old for this shit. Of all the monumental achievements bequeathed to society due to the advancements of chakra utilization towards domestic use, why couldn't there be a better way to read over and sign documents in a professional manner? Honestly, the amount of times that she considered just moving her bed into her office to do. Granny! The door burst open with a bang and showed Naruto in the middle of the doors, agitated, but not considerably short of breath. There were dark bags under his eyes and his clothes were ruffled. Tsunade was jostled back to attention and looked back at him with dark bags of her own. Not that he'd know, they were obscured by her youth. Yes, she mumbled lazily before coughing and straightening out her spine. Yes? She asked again, this time in a more commanding way. Naruto walked up to her desk and placed his palms on the table. See, can you could you RRG? He had planned out how to ask her beforehand, but his words just kept getting muddled in his mouth. Fuck it. He was a man of action anyway. This isn't going to work. He finally got out. Tsunade let her back slump forward and caught her head by the bridge of her nose with her fingers. There's no stopping this. I know. It's just okay, so one of them's nice. That's great. She's great. Good. Her name's Fu. One of them, I don't really know that well, but she's okay. Temari and I get along fine enough. One of them, the one from Rock, I cannot stand. She's such a... Naruto, Tsunade warned. That Sasuke's still in the village here, and the walls have ears. Don't say something you wouldn't say to him. Naruto huffed, and crossed his arms over his chest. Even he has to know that his granddaughter's a bit of a cunt. Oh Christ, Tsunade muttered as she started to rub her temples. And another one, the one from Cloud, Yujito, she threatened to kill me if I came onto her. Which okay, yeah, I get it, don't come onto her, but those were the first things she ever said to me. It was unprovoked. And then, she did this weird nail elongation thingy and put M to my neck. And those things were sharp. I think the lines are still showing on my skin. Naruto tilted his head back so she could see. Tsunade peeked under his chin. He wasn't lying. And I'm pretty sure the last one's an exhibitionist, Naruto said conclusively. Tsunade shrugged helplessly. I don't know what you want me to tell you. At least none of them threatened to kill you outright. That's a plus, right? The status of me not having a death threat should be normal. Tsunade splayed her hands out to the side. Yes, and you're going to have to deal with it. Naruto's face scrunched in frustration and he even took a deep breath like he was about to yell, but he let it out through his nose at the last second. He took a few more deep breaths and sat in the chair opposite Tsunade. Okay, I get it. It's going to happen. But that doesn't mean I have to live with them, does it? It's all just words on paper. Why did you pack up my apartment anyway? My things were good where they were. Tsunade slapped her hands down on the desk a bit harder than she maybe should have. Look, Naruto, the only way any of you are going to get along better is if you spend some time with each other. So yes, I took the liberty of sending your apartment to the house and the biggest room there. And that's a good house, might I add. You would have had to spend your whole life doing missions as a genin if you wanted to even put a down payment on it. Naruto took a calming breath and leveled his tired eyes back onto her. Do I have to spend much time with them? Yes. Naruto flipped his hands through the air in a show of barely restrained consternation. Why? Were you not listening last night? We could have all signed a paper that would have been torn to shreds the moment more than two people had their backs turned. The whole reason that you six were married was because you're important both to the villages and the people inside of it. So yes, you have to interact with each other. Because if our ninjas see you six living together, and they know that you all haven't managed to kill each other, then they might think, maybe our mortal enemies aren't so bad if they're managing to keep the violence to a minimum. So I just have to act? Please don't. You're bad at acting. Just don't kill them. I know you. You won't do that because you're a good person. You're the person I put my faith in, after all. Naruto lowered his gaze. There was a bit of shame rising from his chest. See, can I at least see other people? Naruto asked slowly. Tsunade sighed and looked down on him with a sort of combined fondness and moroseness. I'm sorry. During the deliberations with the rest of the Kage and Shibuki, we decided it was in our best interest to not allow mistresses and the male equivalent among the participants of this marriage. Naruto sort of crumpled in on himself from the combined exhaustion, stress, and emotional trauma. It just kept getting worse and worse. Next thing she was going to say was that he wouldn't be able to try and bring Sasuke back. Tsunade opened her mouth to speak, to which Naruto suddenly pointed a finger at her face and said no. Forced marriage or not, I'm bringing Sasuke back. This isn't going to stop me and I don't care what you have to say about it. Tsunade's eyes colored with a hint of amusement. That's okay, you can do that. I was going to ask how you slept last night. Naruto sighed and leaned back in his chair. Bad. Like really bad. Like only an hour of sleep is bad. Tsunade leaned back as well. I only got 2. Though that was only because I was up with the rest of the Kage, making changes to our agreement. Why didn't you get sleep? Naruto shrugged helplessly. How could I? Just found out I'm being forced into marriage with people I don't know. I got to the house late, and I didn't want to wander the halls because I was scared I'd get my balls cut off by the scary woman with the long nails. And to top it all off, I just found out my dad was the 4th Hokage, who sealed the collective hatred of humanity in my gut for reasons unknown, but thought to be of good nature. Tsunade's eyebrows quivered. So Jiraiya told you about your father? Good. I wasn't sure he would go through with it. Naruto splayed his hands helplessly. Kinda wished I knew all along, but whatever. I don't have the energy to be angry. Tsunade looked behind her to check on the status of the sun. Speaking of energy, the official announcement is going to happen at around noon to the whole of the village. Could you do me a favor and make sure the other 5 make it on time? Naruto's eyes went half-lidded. You were going to refer to them as my harem, weren't you? Tsunade let a bit of her exhaustion show through. It was a long night, she said, as if that was a perfectly reasonable excuse. Naruto got up slowly, gave her a somewhat mocking salute, and exited through the door. 7 a.m. Naruto went to his favorite training ground next. Whenever his brain was stumped with a difficult question, it always helped to go to a field and train his body and various ninjutsu. Because even if he didn't make any progress on a brain problem, it was heartening to know that at the end of the day, he made progress on at least his combat potential. His ninjutsu arsenal might have been sorely lacking to the common bystander, but it wasn't to him. He didn't need a huge amount of ninjutsu that were really only effective in certain situations because he had the most important ninja tool in the written history of shinobi. He had versatility. Though many might laugh at the mere concept, it was Naruto's mind that was his greatest asset. The thing that got him through most of his encounters with life or death was the ability to think up a solid battle strategy on the fly with limited information, a shit ton of improvisation. The fact that he was unpredictable was the reason why he was a person who was difficult to defeat in battle. Thus, Naruto's training usually revolved around him training his body and schooling his mind on how to use shadow clones or differently. Sparring with himself was actually shockingly useful due to the fact that he got the knowledge of what he did wrong with a punch to his face, either giving or receiving. Unlike other people, who often trained in a specific way or style of fighting, he just focused on fighting. Yujito alighted on the ground in perfect view of him doing just that, fighting with himself. It was amusing to watch him beat himself up, so she stood just under the tree-line, practically invisible under the shade of the leaves. A 1-on-1 match turned to 2-on-1. Then 2-on-2, 3-on-1, 2-on-3, 3-on-3 and so on. When she felt like she had a firm grasp on his fighting style, she walked out of the tree-line and towards him. By the time she was noticed, there was practically a war going on between the Narutos. The main Naruto undid and stood, sore and tired from the sparring, and looked at her. Yeah? He asked. He had taken off his shirt, and was practically drenched in sweat. Any bruises that were forming were in the process of getting healed right before her eyes. Her healing factor might have been impressive due to her status as a Jinchuriki, but this was just insane. Yujito's eyes didn't move from his. I came to your village's training grounds to do my daily exercises. I sensed your chakra and came over. Naruto was watching her like a man in front of a tiger who he had been told by his friends was friendly, but he wasn't really sure if they were telling the truth. Her voice wasn't quite monotonous or disinterested, but more detached than anything else. Like she didn't want to do it, but was doing it anyway. Talking to him was like eating vegetables. Right. Naruto said as he took a step back. What, do you want a tour or something? Yujito shook her head. No, just curious about you. We're going to be spending some time together, so I figured we should establish a rapport. What's a rapport? Yujito closed her eyes and let out a small sigh. Let's call it an understanding of sorts. You threatened to kill me, Naruto stated with a deadpan. I was setting a boundary. Is that what they call it in the cloud? A small, sort of dangerous smile flickered on her face for a fraction of a second. I wasn't sure what kind of person you were, or are, for that matter, so I erred on the side of caution. I wouldn't want to kill you if you tried something you shouldn't, after all. Do I look like the kind of guy who'd do something like that? Looks can be deceiving. And sometimes people are like an open book. You see how my face looks kind of annoyed. That means I'm annoyed, Naruto said condescendingly. Yujito took a while to formulate her answer. Too many thoughts flickered through her mind that she wanted to say but knew that she probably shouldn't. No, she was the adult in their situation. She had to be mature. In the end, she decided to go with the best policy, honesty. Her face hardened as she said, I am trying my hardest here. I've just been sent to a country that, historically, I've been at war with my entire life, been told that I was getting in an arranged marriage along with 4 other women, and to top it all off, it's to a boy. The fact that I'm here at all, trying to get to know you better, is only because I want to be sure of where we stand, so I know how to act moving forward. Naruto bristled at the boy comment. She might have been trying for a reasoned response by wearing her thoughts on her sleeve, but it had the opposite effect. He walked up to her and glared at her. She was only 2 or so inches taller than him, so where did she get off calling him a boy? She didn't look that much older than him. I'm not a boy, Naruto said, his eyes slanting dangerously. Yujito huffed out of amusement. She was almost twice his age and had been training as a shinobi nonstop since she was a child. Did he actually think he stood an ice cube's chance in hell against her? Where did all that arrogance come from? Yujito smiled and placed a single finger against his chest. Would you like to put your money where your mouth is, boy? Naruto slapped the hand from his chest. What are the conditions? Taijutsu only. Works for me. They both waited in a status of complete and utter stillness. The wind picked up and ruffled the tree's branches off in the distance. One of the small green leaves broke off a branch and fluttered through the air until it was between them. As soon as that leaf alighted on the ground, they flew into a furious brawl. 7:30. A Naruto clone opened the door to the house the 6 of them were staying at. The only person immediately visible inside was Mei, who was sitting at a table in the kitchen with a newspaper in her hand. Thankfully, she was fully clothed. The clone walked in and leaned against a wall leading to the kitchen. Are you the only one here? He asked. Mei's head tilted a fraction, though her eyes didn't leave the paper. Ah, Naruto. Nice to see you too. Naruto, after a few seconds of deliberation, took a seat opposite her. His face scrunched up for a moment. Mei, right? Mei nodded her head. So are you the only one here? He reiterated. She nodded again. Right, well, the announcement to the village is happening at noon, so Granny wants you to be there at around that time, okay? He was about to get back up, but Mei's eyes snapped away from the paper to his, interrupting his train of thought. Did you just call the most powerful woman in the entire village Granny? Naruto nodded, a small mischievous smile on his face. Yeah. Did you know that she's actually really old and just hides it all with a? Mei looked up, considering that for a moment, before saying I suppose that would make sense. She is from a few generations above me, after all. However, Naruto, you should know that women are sensitive about their age. If you call them Granny, it could hurt their feelings. Naruto sighed into his palm. Look, we have a bit of a history with each other. When I first met her, she was a rotten old hag who was willing to throw Konoha to the wolves. Something's happened, I won a bet, and now she's the Hokage. She's a good person now, don't get me wrong, but I'll never stop calling her that. Mei smiled with a sweetness that couldn't be natural and looked back to her newspaper. That didn't sit well with him, so he asked. Why? HM? May asked, looking up from the printed word. Why does it bother you that much? How old are you anyway? May's face was dangerously still for 5 seconds. 5 whole seconds of doing nothing but looking at him with a smile on her face. He could tell that she was just stalling for time as she figured out an answer, but it still creeped the hell out of him. I'm 24, she finally said. And as for why calling her granny bothers me so much, it's simply proper etiquette. But she is old enough to be a grandmother. It's a term of endearment. May nodded her head down. Still though, it's nice to be considerate of the feelings of others. Naruto let the subject go with a tired shake of his head. He was never going to understand women. So you're 24 then? Honestly, I thought you were older than that. The paper in her hands crinkled with a suddenness Naruto wasn't expecting. It deformed the entire section she had been reading. Naruto didn't have to be a detective to know that he accidentally pissed her right the fuck off. Naruto's brain started working overtime. Why did that just happen? What had he said that made her angry? The only thing he talked about was her age. Naruto choked on his words as he started to get them out. I mean, I only thought that because you act so mature. You look exactly your age. May started inadvertently leaking malicious chakra from her body, making Naruto even more on edge. Why couldn't women be more simple? Why did every interaction he had with one have to be a walking minefield? And why the hell was May sensitive about her age? She was only 24. Naruto, May said slowly and with barely restrained anger. The malicious chakra started to disperse. I understand you have a crush on one Sakura Haruno, correct? She asked, changing the subject. Naruto gulped audibly. Yeah? He said, looking down and grabbing the back of his head. May put the newspaper down serenely. She took a deep breath in and out, then looked at him with her full attention. Her smile was gone. Well, I'm sorry to say that among a few slight changes to your duties as a shinobi, there's the fact that we, the kage of our villages, have made the agreement that concubines or extraneous lovers shouldn't be allowed. Naruto held up a hand to interrupt her. Yeah, I know. Granny told me. But what other changes to my duties are there? May considered it for a moment. Nothing of major consequence. You'll be more protected since you're the member with the lowest prestige and ability in our arrangement. Also, after the announcement here in the Leaf, the 6 of us will be going around the countries in a circle making similar announcements to the villages, ending with the Iron Country. Setting aside that bit about lowest prestige and ability, Naruto asked what village is in Iron Country? That's where the convention of minor villages is going to be held. Shibuki of Waterfall is acting as the de facto leader of the Minor Village Alliance. Naruto's eyes widened somewhat. There's a Minor Village Alliance? It's mostly just talk, so I doubt many of the shinobi of those same villages are aware of it either. You didn't think Fu was just representative of the waterfall, did you? Well, she is, but she's also representing the villages smaller than the Big Five. Damn. Damn indeed. The Naruto clone slapped both of his knees and went to stand up. I'm done here. Announcement at noon and Naruto, May asked serenely. She had her face back on. Every time she wore it, it filled his stomach with no small amount of dread. Yeah? He asked. Don't ever talk about my age again, or I'll kill you. With not a second left to lose, the Naruto clone dispelled in a hurry. He knew that even if she was inclined to begin hostilities against him that he wouldn't feel anything and would dispel anyways, but that face made him think twice about it. At least he knew now to steer clear of that woman like she was the plague. 742. Another Naruto clone was patrolling the village, looking for the 3 other girls. He had seen Kuratsuchi in the sights of another clone, so that only left Temari and Fu left to alert. 2 people in an entire village that housed tens of thousands. This wasn't going to be fun. Naruto landed on the ground, kicking up some dust from the street. The dirt ground was dry and flew up easily. It was hot out, more so than usual, and it was mostly due to the humidity. And it was only morning. He couldn't imagine how hot it would be throughout the day. It was enough to make him consider running across the ground, where shade tended to be more plentiful, rather than the rooftops that he had grown accustomed to. He put his hands on his hips and looked around the somewhat populated streets. He needed to consume something cold. A lot of the buildings and shops had changed since he'd been away. He hadn't even tracked down most of his friends yet. It was a good thing businesses opened up early in Konoha. As he looked around more sedately, He realized that his feet had inadvertently found his way to Ichiraku's. Ramen with a cool drink sounded perfect. Temari and Fu could wait. He flipped away the flaps and was halfway through saying, "Hey old man, guess who's B?" before he realized one of his targets was sitting at the stools. She was out of her pajamas and had put on a black kimono with red trimming. On her back was a war fan as tall as herself. Temari turned around and looked at him. It was as if someone had drained all the emotion out of her face and had just left the exhaustion. "Hey Naruto!" Tsuchi exclaimed exuberantly. "When did you get back? Sit down, let me get you a bowl of your favorite." Naruto smiled, though it lacked a lot of conviction, and sat down next to Temari. His interactions with Mei had taught him to handle the opposite sex like one would handle high-impact explosives. In front of her was a practically untouched bowl of ramen heavy with vegetables. "So what brings you here?" Naruto asked gingerly. Temari straightened out her spine and sighed. "Nothing. What about you?" She was talking like her mouth was on autopilot. Pleasantries spilled from her lips with perfect ease and practice, but her heart wasn't in it. It's hot out," Naruto said lamely. "Hey old man, can I have something cold to drink?" Tsuchi tilted his head away from the ramen pot for a second. "Like what? There are options now?" Even though his face wasn't visible, Naruto could just feel the grin on the old man's lips. "Yes, sir. We have all kinds of things now." "Lemonade?" "Right up." Naruto and Tsuchi started up a back and forth, bringing Naruto up to speed on the goings-on and happenings of Konoha as well as giving Tsuchi a little insight on Naruto's training trip. Most of it was just idle chit-chat that didn't really mean anything, however. Temari sat still and stared listlessly into her bowl the entire way through their interactions. She was listening, but she also wasn't. Eventually, a few people filtered in through the flaps and teacher's attention was drawn away from Naruto. He sat awkwardly still and began to dig into his ramen. It was hard to sit next to a sad person without asking them what was wrong. "So, Naruto started out, swallowing a particularly hefty portion of noodles. "Granny's announcing the whole thing at noon. We all need to be there for it." Temari nodded, but other than that, Naruto was given no indication of whether or not she was actually listening. Naruto put his chopsticks on top of the bowl and turned around to face her fully. "Okay, what's wrong?" he asked directly. Temari glanced his way. "Nothing." "It's not nothing. You look like a zombie." Her brow furrowed with annoyance as she turned to him. "I said it doesn't matter. It's none of your business anyway. Why do you care?" "Oh my god," Naruto said as he pinched his temples with his thumb and fingers, obscuring his eyes. "I asked because there's something obviously bothering you. Don't just bottle all that stuff up. Just talk already. It's not like I'm going to tell anyone if it's embarrassing." Temari seemed to lose the energy she had gained from her annoyance, and looked back to her ramen bowl. "Everything's wrong. This whole situation, cock-up, alliance, harem, whatever it is. I'm married now to a person I barely know. This is just... it's fucked. That's what it is. It's fucked." Naruto lowered his voice. "You were fine this morning." Temari glared at her ramen. "You know Shikamaru?" Naruto nodded. "Well, I liked him and I got the feeling that he liked me for a while. There was always this. It's not like there was tension or anything, but it was like the both of us were waiting for the other one to make a move. I just told him a few minutes ago about the contract. About the fact that I'm now in a harem." Naruto's mood started to turn more along the lines of hers. "Oh," he said. I think it's starting to sink in. This could be it. This," she gesticulated around her wildly. "This could be me for the rest of my life, stuck in a loveless marriage with 4 other women." She pinched the bridge of her nose. "I shouldn't be mad at you, you didn't do anything wrong, but it's hard not to be." "I'm angry too, you know," Naruto said with his lowest energy setting possible. "It's not fair. This sucks. But it's not like this has to define you, or anything. It's just words on paper. I, for one, am still going to become Hokage no matter what's in my way. I'm going to bring my best friend back home and I'm going to fulfill my promise to Sakura. What about you? What do you want to do?" Temari rested her chin on her palm. She was back to staring at her noodles. "I just wanted a normal life." "Aren't you the daughter of the Kage of your village? I'm pretty sure normal wasn't an option the moment you were born." "I am the sister of the Kage right now, actually. And it's not like I wanted a life without excitement. I just wanted to be able to make friends in the academy. or to walk down the street without people whispering behind my back. Shikamaru was actually probably the only person I know of that actually treated me like a normal human. After a few moments of heavy deliberation, Naruto reached out a hand and patted her on the back with a small amount of trepidation. It was like he was patting the back of a dog he suspected might have rabies. "You know, I could be your friend." She looked at him like he was speaking a second language. "What?" "And so could Sakura and Ino and Hinata. Kiba acts like a mutt, and Shino's a bit creepy sometimes. Chuji's really into food, like really into food, and you know Shikamaru. Lee's really cool, but he doesn't have an off switch. Niji's kind of a bastard, but he's nice deep down. And I don't really know a lot about Tenten, but actually, I think she's probably the most normal person I know. They're all my friends, and now they're all yours. See how that works?" Temari was silent for a short time. I'm not the biggest social butterfly in the world. Do you really think they'd like the unwilling wife of a friend?" Naruto grinned a little bit. "You're selling yourself short. You're a lot easier to talk to than any girl I know, at least. That has to count for something. Plus, you're pretty. That always helps." A huff of laughter escaped her lips. "Yeah, okay." She took in a deep breath and let it out slowly. I guess you're right. I wanted to sulk about this a little bit more, but you're right. Life isn't over. I can manage this." Temari picked up her chopsticks and stirred the noodles around in the broth. There were worse people she could end up stuck with for the rest of her life with. She didn't know whether or not unending optimism was going to get old in the long run, but it was better than pretending she didn't exist at least. And then the Naruto clone dispelled without warning. 740. Naruto first saw Kuratsuchi as she was standing out in the streets trying to decide between two shops. One, a run-of-the-mill shinobi outfitter, the kind that bought stock from all over the world and sold it rather than having a specialization in clothes, armor, weapons, or what have you. And two, a civilian fashion store with predominantly female summer clothes on mannequins visible through the windows. The shinobi store's insides were dark with lots of blacks and grays, while the civilian shop was white with pinks and light blues. Deciding between the two was like deciding what kind of day you were going to have. He didn't know why, but seeing her try to decide between the two stores had him wait before he confronted her outright. Such indecision on her part was sure to result in something fun and regretful, right? Something he could hold over her for as long as she lived. Her fist clenched hard before she decided on the civilian store, hiding her headband in a pocket. Naruto followed her through the door after he put on a transformation to make him look like Naruto. Kuratsuchi only got about 5 steps in before a woman in a store uniform walked up to her with a patently fake, toothy smile and asked, "Hello, are you looking for anything in particular?" Kuratsuchi's head was on a swivel as she superficially looked all over the store. "Why no, I'm just looking." She spoke like she was nervous, or even worse, embarrassed. It was a far cry from the brusque girl he almost got into a shouting match only an hour or so ago. Kuratsuchi walked stiffly over to the women's section and stared at all the dresses on the mannequins. Not knowing that she was being watched, her face went through the gamut of expressions. From apprehension, to judging, to surprised, to thoughtful, to wary. She always ended up going back to one tucked away to the side, a modest white summer dress with a simple pattern. She stood in front of it for a very long time, biting the insides of her cheek before she finally got a replica near the model and fast walked to the changing room. Oh, this was perfect. The foul-mouthed tomboy had a penchant to the more stereotypically feminine pursuits, and better yet, was ashamed about it. Naruto wasn't going to let this go. He was going to tease her relentlessly. Maybe then she would think better about bad-mouthing the prankster king of Konoha. In fact, ideas were already running through his head about how to prank her to hell and back. Naruto grabbed a random dress and followed after her, getting into the dressing room adjacent to Kuratsuchi. Kuratsuchi really put new meaning to speed. She was in there for all of 5 seconds before coming out of the room. He'd even been planning on making rustling sounds as if he were putting the dress on. Realism was what sold pranks, after all. The boy transformed as a woman poked his head out to see Kuratsuchi standing at the opposite end of the dressing room, where there was a semicircle of mirrors arranged so that she could see all angles of herself. Kuratsuchi busied herself with looking into the mirrors with a few backward glances and straightening out the dress. Her face had a mixture of apprehension and fear, like she was scared someone she knew would pop out of nowhere and see her in an embarrassing state. Too bad for her, that was exactly what was going to happen. Naruto walked up behind Kuratsuchi and clapped a hand on her shoulder. No, no, your stance is all wrong. Kuratsuchi visibly recoiled from the clone's touch. And you are? She asked, very irritated that anyone had acknowledged her as existing at that moment in time. Naruto smiled. Names. Sakura. Harino Sakura. Naruto's name was too similar to Naruto, and they already had a resemblance going on, so he made it up on the fly. Kuratsuchi scrunched her eyebrows together. Sakura. That sounds familiar. It's a common name here. Huh. Kuratsuchi seemed to buy that excuse and turned back to the mirror. Her eyebrows were still scrunched, but more out of consternation than suspicion. What were you talking about? You're trying to impress a boy, aren't you? First confusion, then an unwillingness to tell the truth because it would take too long, and she was talking to a stranger across her face. Yeah, sure, let's go with that. Anyway, what's wrong with my stance? Naruto backed up and looked her up and down. You're too stiff. You look like you're about to pounce on someone. Kuratsuchi nodded and bounced on her heels a little bit, taking in deep breaths of air. Yeah, I guess you're right. How do you do it? Like, look. Girly. Naruto smiled. He almost felt bad for what he was doing. Almost. First try smiling. Kuratsuchi did, and it looked bad. Bad to the point where Naruto had to use all the willpower he had not to burst out laughing. Okay. That's good. Just try to think of something funny. Kuratsuchi's face morphed into frustration before she relaxed herself and tried again. Naruto wished he had a camera to commemorate the event. But those were bulky, expensive, and hard to carry out anywhere. Why don't you just try a pose then? Doesn't have to be serious. It can just warm you up. Naruto was going to have to make an awards ceremony if only to give him the medal of world-class bullshitter. Kuratsuchi put one hand on the side of her head and one on her hip, then tried to smile. Naruto burst out laughing despite his body's earnest struggle to keep calm. He laughed and laughed until Kuratsuchi looked at him like he was an insane person. She looked about as ridiculous as a bear in a tutu. What the hell's your problem? Oh, dearest, I'm just having the most fun I think I've ever had in my life. Naruto undid the transformation as he doubled over from the laughter. Kuratsuchi's face turned bright red from a mixture of embarrassment and supreme anger. When Naruto saw this happen, he pointed at her face and started laughing harder. She cracked her knuckles very harshly, starting the process of ramping down Naruto's natural high. Any last words before I encase you in cement for the rest of your godforsaken life? She asked in a low voice. Naruto held up a hand. Yeah, he took a deep breath. What? Sure, you can do whatever you want, but only after I tell you something. Speak. Granny's making the announcement at noon. So be at the Kage administration at around then. That it? Naruto shrugged with a please for the love of God, punch me in the face. Yeah, but it's not like it really matters. I'm a CL. Without Kuratsuchi having done anything, the Naruto clone dispelled mid-sentence. At first, she thought it was a deliberate move on his part to escape her wrath, but then she felt a sort of malice begin to permeate through the air. She'd felt that sort of feeling before. It made her forget all the righteous fury that had been building in her body until that moment. It made her uneasy, then somewhat frightened. She dashed through the dressing room to see the various workers of the shop milling back and forth with frightened and worried expressions on their faces. They could feel it too, but they also knew that there wasn't anything exploding or the roars of great beasts that had become familiar to them, even if they had only heard it on one occasion. It was demonic, unrestrained chakra. Kuratsuchi began to feel real, unbridled fear. 744. The Naruto clone was, for lack of a better word, starting to feel good. He couldn't really put a finger on the whys, whens, or hows, just that when he was with Fu, he felt happier. It didn't take long for him to find Fu. In fact, it was more Fu who found him, and when they met, he decided to take her on a tour of Konoha. She was bubbly and happy and interesting, and not just easy to talk to, but fun to talk to. He laughed a lot when he was with her. He couldn't remember the last time he felt so comfortable around someone. And that was only adding on to the fact that they had only been really interacting for about an hour or so. It was like she wore her heart on her sleeve. She desperately wanted to connect to people and to have fun with them. He couldn't think of another person who was as much alike as him in personality than her. Perhaps that age-old adage of opposites attract really was bogus. Because he was really starting to like her. Currently, they were resting on top of the fourth Hokage's monument head eating a boxed breakfast from a vendor. The rising sun gave them a really good view of the village. The sky was blue, there were a few clouds rolling through the sky, and the birds chirped happily in the breeze. Fu finished her food, set aside her box, and leaned back against the monument, holding her stomach in comic satisfaction. That hits the spot, she said. Naruto sat back as well and let out a loud burp. Damn straight. Fu giggled. That was a good one. Wait, let me try. She cleared her throat and sucked in her breath. Naruto waited in mock anticipation for several seconds until one of the loudest and longest belches he had ever heard outside of an Akamichi feast belted out from her stomach. Naruto laughed once she was done. That was impressive. Fu smiled. Damn straight. They sat in a comfortable silence for a few moments before Naruto tilted his head towards her. Hey, what's that red thing on your back anyway? My colony. Naruto ought as if he'd understood it before his brain processed what she had said in full. Your colony? Fu smiled smugly and put her hands behind her head. My tailed beast is the seven-tailed beetle, so I can talk to bugs. The ones I like I keep on my back. So, like the aburame? A little bit. They mostly keep to one type of bug though. I can keep all types of bugs. And you can do this because of your demon? Fu hummed an affirmative. All the tailed beasts give us cool abilities. Or at least that's what I've heard. The only other Jinchuriki I've met in person are you and Yujito. Naruto cupped his chin. What's my cool ability then? Fu shrugged. I don't know. Why don't you ask? Asked who? She poked him in the belly, where he had mentioned his seal was. The guy in your gut. Naruto laughed fully and heartily, until he realized she was being serious. He wants to take over my body. Of course I'm not going to ask. And even I wanted to and could do that, he, or it, is just a mass of evil chakra, right? Fu frowned a little bit. Evil? Tailed beasts aren't evil. Komiai's really nice. Maybe Mr. Ninetales is kinda mean, but that doesn't mean you can't try to be nice. Naruto sat forward and held his head in his hands. Maybe. Fu thought for a moment before a light bulb went off in her head. Hey, wanna see something else I can do? Naruto turned to look at her. He began to say sure, but was dispelled halfway through. Fu, for her part, was somewhat shocked by this. This shock only stuck around long enough for the feeling of malignant chakra to wash over her. She stood up on the monument and created wings from her chakra, what she had been planning to show him before he dispelled, then took to the air. It didn't take her long to see off in the training fields a huge swath of trees get turned to cinders and ash as a blue streak of fire zipped around a red streak of solid chakra. Naruto and Yujito had gotten into their beast forms. Fu felt a deep and profound worry grow in her gut. Chapter 4. In his defense, Naruto never thought it would escalate the way it did. He just really wanted to win is all. Perhaps it was because he'd been under a little too much stress as of late, or that there wouldn't ever be a future with him and Sakura. Or the simple fact that he was still feeling the lingering grogginess and associated grumpiness that came with very little sleep, or even. Wait, no? Naruto knew exactly why it escalated the way it did. It was because he wanted to wipe that smirk off her face. So haughty and smug. It didn't matter that Yujito didn't look a thing like Sasuke, because whenever he saw that look brimming with a superiority that didn't have to be stated outright because it was just known by everyone. He was a kid again in the academy trying his best to stand up against the Uchiha's overwhelming power that seemed to come out of nowhere. He hated that smirk more than anything in his life. It reminded him of everything he used to be that he wanted to leave behind. As soon as the leaf touched the ground between them, Naruto rushed forward and tried to punch her in the face, such was his consternation. She parried the blow away, stepped forward, and planted a knee into his stomach, launching him backwards a few feet. Naruto coughed up some spit, got his balance back and let his nose curl into a semi-snarl. You call that an attack? He asked. Her smirk only grew in scope and scale. No, I don't. Naruto breathed out slowly and rushed right back at her again. He found that she was right to be confident in her strength at least, but not enough that he would concede defeat so easily. Whether it was because of her being a Jinchuriki to a cat beast or not, her flexibility was far and away echelons above anything or anyone he had fought before. She contorted her limbs around in ways that would break or pop out of socket to any normal person. This meant that not only did he barely touch her throughout their spar, it meant that he couldn't predict the way she moved with any regularity, and also meant that he got more strikes underneath the neck than he had been preparing for. She wasn't lying about that previous jab either. She hit hard and she hit mean. Any normal man would have seen his obvious disadvantage and conceded defeat then and there, lest they become any more bruised and battered than they already were, except Naruto knew about his strengths and weaknesses. He might get batted around like a yarn ball in any straight taijutsu fight, but he could continue to get batted around ad infinitum. He had endurance, and he had the will to never give up, even for things one might consider to be petty. Most importantly, however, he wasn't against tricking his opponents. WHPHM. Over the course of 30 seconds, Naruto had made it appear that his arms were becoming heavier and heavier, until they reached below his face, creating a faux opening that Yujito took full advantage of. Already, he was getting a feel for her fighting style. She struck at what was most painful, or what was most debilitating. An open face was like catnip to her. She couldn't resist it. Naruto crumpled and got to one knee, his smirk hidden by his downturned head and sweat-logged hair. Yujito was breathing hard as she stopped before him, one neuron blast away from sending a leg crashing down on his exposed neck. She had to remind herself that it was just a spar. He looked to be down for the count. That might teach him to be too arrogant around her. Still though, he could take a punch. If he got any better, he'd be a good workout. Better than any wooden dummy, that was for sure. Are you oh? Crack. Her world suddenly turned sideways and upside down. Her cheek was smarting with pain and there was blood on her tongue. Another punch rocked her world, this time to the other side, before she planted both feet on the ground and pounced away from him. They stood up, several meters apart, both worn by the battle, but only one tired from it. Yujito wiped the blood/drool that was flowing out of her lips and straightened out her back, trying her best to get oxygen back into her body. He was standing as tall and confident as ever, not perturbed by the least from the plethora of bruises forming all over his body, or the intense fight they just had. That was dirty, she said, a full-on snarl marrying her face. Naruto shrugged with a half-cocked smile. We all have to play to our strengths. Yujito's snarl quickly turned to a smile that knew more than he did. You've got that right, she muttered, only barely audibly, before her finger and toenails grew in size until they were all the length of kitchen knives and, from the way her toenails sunk into the ground whenever they touched it, appeared to be just as sharp. Naruto saw this and took half a step back. No ninjutsu, he said seriously. No ninjutsu, Yujito parroted back at him. And it wasn't, not technically at least. It used chakra, but she never had to do signs for it. It was just something that she could do. The boy's face took on a tinge of fear, only making the smile on Yujito's face race upwards more. She wasn't going to cut him up too bad. Not enough to leave permanent damage anyways. Just enough to get him to surrender. Maybe a little more for those cheap shots. Yujito's claws dug into the ground as she got on all fours. The grass between him and her flung away as she raced towards him with all the ferocity and lethality of a big cat. Naruto ducked under the first slash, blocked the second slash with his forearm, and caught the third between his torso and his other arm, making him wide open for the fourth slash to swing upwards and rake across his chest. Fuck! Naruto spat out as he gripped her arm and flung her away like an oddly shaped kettlebell. She hit the ground crouched on all fours with a wide smile on her face. Give up, she said. Naruto shook his head. I never give up. Yujito sunk her nails back into the ground, then prepared to be cut up. This loop happened a few more times. Yujito would pounce forward, wound him, then jump back and re-evaluate him. Her fighting style had changed to less of that of a cat's, and more like a shark's. She wasn't hurting him with anything more than seriously painful cuts and barbs, then circled around him like a shark waiting for its meal to die. Almost every inch of his body had long cuts or small holes leaking blood. Everything from the neck down was a reddened mess of angry skin drenched in sweaty blood. He was being cut to death. Yujito's jaws clenched a few times. They'd been going at it for a while and he was still standing. Any more and she might get in trouble for spousal abuse. Give up! She spat out again, this time with more desperation. Naruto got to his full height and stared back at her. I never give up, he said, just as resolute as ever. Yujito was breathing hard. She was going to have to stop this soon. No more playing around. She had to knock him out and drag him to a medic ASAP. His resilience was going to be the death of him if he let it. Her claws dug into the ground and her body flung forward claws first. She aimed her first strike at his chest, but he ducked down at the last second until his head and face were about to be struck by her claws. A cold grip of fear latched onto her stomach and didn't let go for a fraction of a second. The window might have been small, but Naruto took full advantage of it. He grabbed her outstretched hand and twirled around, using her momentum to slam her into the ground. As quickly as he could, he sat on her torso with knees on either side of her chest. She tried to strike him with the arm that wasn't being held, but Naruto caught that one too. On a good day, she was stronger than him, but the fight had worn on to the point where her muscles ached with exertion. Naruto planted both of her hands on either side of her head and brought his forehead crashing down on her nose. The first time it happened, she was shocked enough that a second one could land. She tried to wriggle her way out of his hold, but his forehead kept on crashing down on her face and head, making her lose focus as a flash of pain and shock derailed her brain every 2 seconds. Soon, their faces were drenched in a mixture of both blood types. Perhaps it was then that Yujito drew on the power of Matatabi. She didn't mean to do it. Her body reacted faster than her mind, both when the power came back to her to overpower him, and when she sunk all 10 nails deep into his torso. They were like that for a still pause, both wondering if what had happened had truly happened. It was only when Naruto realized he had been skewered that red chakra came forth from his body and engulfed his skin. There was a blank space in both their memories after that. How long they fought, they couldn't tell. Naruto was engulfed in a rage not totally unknown to him, and Yujito was consumed by fear and anxiety. Her mastery over Matatabi's chakra was brute-forced and unlike B's and Gyuki's. She had never really gotten a hang of defeating her negative emotions. The best she could do was to still them momentarily before engaging in battle. When they came crashing onto her without warning, she lost control. The simple fact that she didn't have complete control over Matatabi's chakra was an endless pool of shame to her. Whenever she blanked, which thankfully hadn't happened in years until now, she always woke up with the fear that she had hurt or killed somebody important to her. It was the sudden and alarming realization that she couldn't move anymore that consciousness returned to her. Yujito's arms and legs were held in place by what felt like wood, and her head was lolling down uselessly. Yujito. Even bringing her head up to look up at the furious face of the Raikage made her entire body light up with pain. RRRR. She tried to ask what was happening, but her words turned into strangled mumbles. The kind of pain she was in wasn't the worst she had ever felt, but it was vying for a close second. AI took it upon himself to grab her forehead so that she could look into his directly. "What happened?" he screamed. Yujito's eyes flickered from side to side a few times. They were still in the training fields, but it looked like one that went through the ringer. Huge gauges of earth had been ripped from the ground, and there were patches of blackened earth where the fire had eaten away. Aye. Her voice was coming back, but her mind was still reeling. AI backed out of the way, allowing Yujito to see her opponent strung up much the same way she was, in a tangle of branches holding his legs together and his arms to the side. His lower body was obscured by the frantic back of Tsunade, and by his side was Jiraiya, who was biting the side of his finger with a worried expression. There was a green glow emanating from somewhere in front of Tsunade, putting a light green glow to whatever pallid skin still remained. Naruto's body had entire parts of where his skin was burnt away, showing inflamed muscle underneath. "Whose fault was this?" AI yelled at Yujito again. "This isn't the time or the place," Jiraiya yelled back. AI whipped around. "You assured me he was stable. If it was him that hurt Yujito, she's barely conscious. And how can we rule out that it wasn't her fault in this? You would dare to?" "Quiet, both of you!" Tsunade shouted out. There was a slight break in her voice. Yujito couldn't see the Hokage's face, but she could practically feel the tears falling down the woman's face. The sounds of a bug's buzzing came upon her from behind until food dropped from the sky between them, wings folding back into her back. Her afraid, ashen face switched between Yujito and Naruto a few times, unsure of who deserved the most worry and attention. This was bad. She fucked up big time. This was no time to be shifting the blame on him. The only thing left was to tell the truth and apologize. She'd let her arrogance obscure her pride, and this was the price. She promised to try her best to get along with him, and this was the result? What was she, a toddler? Yujito coughed out whatever blockage remained in her throat and opened her mouth to speak. Everyone's eyes were on her, except for Tsunade, who was listening intently. "Arakage-sama? The truth is that it was my fault." Everyone whipped around to look at Naruto, eyes cracked barely open and a pained grimace on his face. Despite the no doubt huge amount of pain he was in, Yujito could tell the grimace was fueled by shame rather than pain. Did he think it was really his fault? How much did he remember? What did you just say? AI asked dangerously. Naruto coughed again. We were sparring and I lost control. I didn't mean to. It just happened. AI pointed his attention towards Jiraiya. You told me he was under control. He is under control. This is just a freak accident is all, Jiraiya said with a mixture of fear, desperation, and self-defense. And he's not the only one who's at fault here. I was under the impression that your Jinchuriki had lost control as well. Look at her, she's barely conscious. You would attack my Jinchuriki to cover up the mistakes of your own? Hey! Fu barked out. Everyone pointed their ire at Fu, who stood proud and tall through it all. She made a ramp-down gesticulation with her arms. Let's all just calm down here. It's not easy being a Jinchuriki, you know. Sometimes you lose control even though you didn't mean to. Plus, we're all only just getting to know each other. It's better that this happened now. We know our limits. AI huffed. I know better than anyone what it's like being a Jinchuriki. My own brother is one. But you aren't, Fu said, interrupting him and pointing a finger at his chest. This isn't anybody's fault. It happens. No. Yujito coughed out, sense finally seeming to come to her. He asked me to help him control his powers. I wasn't being vigilant enough, and he lost control. It was my fault, not his. Jiraiya whistled appreciatively. Hear that? AI's eyes narrowed. And the boy saying it was a spar? It was a spar, Naruto said quickly, eyes darting between Yujito and AI a few times. That's how she was teaching me. I accidentally hurt her pretty bad, so she didn't have a choice but to use her powers too. Jiraiya crossed his arms over his chest and looked at the ground, sighing. It's not like there's any real damage here. Nobody got hurt. I got hurt, Naruto said weakly. Quiet boy, Jiraiya hissed out. Anyways, like I was saying, nobody got hurt. Collateral damage was minimal. Why don't we just file this away as a training mishap? AI looked between the two restrained Jinchuriki a few times before huffing and walking off without saying a word before vanishing in a flash of lightning. Tsunade let a sigh of relief puff through her lips. Naruto's skin was rapidly healing to the point where it was almost like he'd never been hurt before in his life, but his eyes were fluttering close, betraying a deep exhaustion he was only barely staving off. There was a tense few seconds of silence before Jiraiya clapped his hands and said, "Okay, Tenzo, you can stop now." Yujito lurched and fell to her feet, now unrestrained by the bondage that held her. She rubbed her raw wrists without daring to look at how Naruto was doing. A man wearing an ANBU mask she guessed was Tenzo walked towards Tsunade, who dismissed him with a wave of her hand. Tsunade stood up straight with one of Naruto's arms draped around her shoulders and turned to Yujito. Her face was that of the austere, composed, and headstrong Hokage, but it was threatening to give way to a plethora of emotions. "Thank you," Tsunade said quietly. Her tone was betraying her face. "I know it was hard to lie to your commander. If he found out Naruto was prone to losing control to the Kyuubi, he would have demanded a better deal. It would have set our negotiations back to square one." Yujito was wobbly on her feet, but she could hold herself up just fine. Strength was returning to her rapidly thanks to Matatabi. She couldn't raise her head to look at Tsunade. The shame was too great. "No, it's… I really did lose control there. I shouldn't be. I really am to blame." Fu shook her head. "I doubt that's true. If you were telling the truth, then the blame is shared." Yujito raised her hand to protest more, but it fell down quickly. If the lie was believed and effective, then it didn't need to be nullified for the truth. Especially when the details were inconsequential. Yujito also had a sneaking feeling that everything would be worse off if she decided to tell the whole truth. She decided instead to walk forward and take Naruto's full weight on her body, grunting a little from the exertion. "Are you okay to do that?" Tsunade asked warily. "Yeah," Yujito said, nodding quickly. Her pupils turned to slits as her body started drawing on more of Matatabi's chakra. She stood up straight and held him tightly to her side. His feet were practically dragging on the ground. "Don't worry. I'll take him to the house." Tsunade looked at the two of them warily. Naruto was of the resilient sort. Now that his injuries were healed, he mostly needed some R&R. "Just make sure he's awake and at the Kage Tower by at least noon," Tsunade warned. "Let him sleep until then." Yujito nodded and set off to the house at a somewhat slow walk. Fu got into a hover and followed them. I could carry him back. It'd be faster, she said enticingly. Yujito shook her head. No. I have to do this. Fu thought about arguing her point more, but Yujito didn't even have to look at her to let it be known that she was going to be stubborn on this one. After biting her cheek for a few seconds, Fu flew off to help spread the word to all the panicked people that nothing was wrong. It was a conditioned response to do it back at Waterfall whenever she accidentally succumbed to her emotions within a certain distance of the village. Once they were alone, Yujito shifted Naruto onto her back, where his body lost all of its tension. His head lolled onto her shoulder, unable to be kept up with his neck anymore. He might have been heavy, but she was strong. My, what a display. Yujito hung her head down even further. Her cheeks burned with the combined embarrassment and shame. I know, she thought back. I really screwed the pooch this time, didn't I? She had an unsubstantiated mental image of Matatabi playing around with a large ball of yarn while she talked. She always had this tone about her, as if she doing something that didn't take many mental faculties while she spoke. Oh, I don't know. That Fu girl was right for the most part. The blame is shared. And it rests mostly on my shoulders. Yujito thought back. Naruto shifted his head on her shoulder blades into a more comfortable position. No pun intended. You're too hard on yourself, kitten. Maybe your pride is part of the blame in this, but that boy should have known better than to stick out a fight he couldn't win just to prove a point. Especially considering the both of your conditions, i.e. Kurama and I. That doesn't change anything, Yujito replied. I was the more mature one. Huh? Naruto asked blearily from her back. Oh shit, did she say that out loud? Jay, just go back to sleep, she said hurriedly. Naruto let out a pained moan. I was never asleep. Can't walk on my own is all. Wouldn't let you carry me otherwise. Oh, just ask him what he thinks then. If it really was your fault, he could have thrown you under the bus, but he didn't. I can't do that. Yes, you can. No, I can't. I almost killed him not 5 minutes ago. Are you going to let your social awkwardness dictate your life? I am not socially awkward. Naruto jostled on her shoulder from the sudden outburst. What? He asked. Yujito nearly tripped on a loose stone. The grass was turning into a dirt road. She was making pretty good time on her way to the house. I was talking to Mata, Yujito said lamely. What, is that like your imaginary friend? The tips of her ears were burning from the assumed embarrassment. No, she's the two-tails. Sometimes I switch from mentally speaking to her to physically talking. That's it. Naruto grunted an affirmation, then settled back into her shoulder. After 5 minutes of plodding down the street with indecision clawing at her mind, Yujito finally built up the courage to ask why did you cover for me? Huh? Naruto grunted. Yujito gulped hard. I was the first one to lose control. Then I. If you weren't a Jinchuriki, you would have died. That was my fault, but you took the blame. Why did you do that? It appeared as though Naruto still had the energy to let loose a deep sigh into her shoulder if nothing else. I was being an asshole. It was just supposed to be a spar, but I took it way too far. It was my fault you did that. His tone was clipped and resigned. His jubilance was gone from more than just a lack of energy. He didn't feel good about what he did either. Yujito shook her head. No, it wasn't. I'm not supposed to lose control. I should have called the match. How could you have? I was bashing your head in with my head. Even if you tapped out, I wouldn't have known it. I was being an asshole. It was my fault. Yujito gulped again. I escalated the spar. So did I. The street began to turn to a semi-paved road. People started popping up on the road, and each and every one of them stopped to stare at them. She was used to the looks and the whispers of subtle disapproval, but these took it up a notch. It was probably a confluence of factors that made them stop and stare, but the harshness of the glares made her realize that his life probably was too peachy either. I'm sorry, Yujito said after a few more minutes of walking. Huh? For what? I was acting like a child. You have it hard too. I shouldn't have goaded you. Naruto sighed again. It's fine. I was being a pill too. And also for, threatening you last night. If Naruto had the energy to raise his eyebrows, they'd hitting his hairline. This new meek Yujito was more than a surprise. And? Yujito started. She'd been wanting to ask this question, but her mind kept blocking he from doing so. How did you know I'd lock up if I tried to hit you in the face? If Naruto could have shrugged indifferently, he would have. I didn't. You were pretty keen on hitting below the head, so I just assumed you didn't want anyone to know how much I got the shit kicked out of me. I took a risk and it paid off. They were in front of the door to the house when Naruto put his palms on her shoulders and hopped off her back. He stumbled under his own weight, to which Yujito looped an arm under his armpit and held him up. Thanks, Naruto said, blinking rapidly to get the stars out of his eyes. No problem, Yujito said quietly, opening the door and walking in. They couldn't get 2 steps in before Fu flew up from the couch and stopped in front of them. Are you guys okay? Do you need help? He just needs rest, Yujito said quickly, cutting Fu off mid-sentence and walking down the hallway. Naruto only needed to hold on to her for the balance now, but even so, he was snug against her side. Not that he was complaining. He wasn't about to turn down help from someone offering it, even if that person had almost killed him. Temari walked out from a hallway with wide, searching eyes and watched them shamble upstairs, where the rooms were. She didn't say anything to them or offered help of any kind. They shared a look she was used to seeing very often at her home, silent disapproval directed to the self. The first door they opened, they found Kuratsuchi lounging on a bed with a penguin's sleeping cap firmly planted on her head as she pored over an open scroll. She looked up and raised a tired eyebrow. Yes? She asked. This is his room, Yujito said tiredly. She wasn't in any mood for a verbal back and forth between the two of them. Beat it. Kuratsuchi put her hands behind her head and leaned back. No, I claimed this room. It's mine. One of Yujito's eyes twitched. He needs to rest. This is the room whe. It's fine, Naruto mumbled out, his tired eyes searching the room and finally settling on Kuratsuchi. I'm sorry, by the way, he said flatly. Kuratsuchi looked taken aback. Excuse me? Naruto put his free hand to pinch the bridge of his nose as he searched for the right words. For making fun of you for the dress. You're sensitive about that and I'm sorry. Kuratsuchi's eyes narrowed. You damned well better be. Go sleep in the last room. I'm pretty sure Fu hasn't gotten to it yet. Naruto nodded and leaned away from the door, prompting Yujito to follow. Oh, he said, grabbing the doorway at the last second and peeking his head in. You looked really pretty, he said with the confidence of a man half asleep and with nothing much to lose. The two of them vacated the door quick enough that he didn't get to see her purse her lips with a small flare of red reach the tips of her ears, nor when she quietly muttered asshole. The next room they opened had scrolls open all over the floor with a couple of battle fans open and spread out over them. There was a pair of crumpled clothes balled up on one side of a disordered bed. Temari's, Yujito murmured, drawing back with him. Opening another one, they saw a bed with a few different pairs of battle dresses, all with varying degrees of navy blue to them and dress lines. The top of the dresser already had an assortment of hygiene products with a few bottles used for prescription medicine among them. Maize, Naruto muttered. The last one they opened up had a bustling nest of bugs on the bed, all somehow managing to not eat each other. Other than that, there were a few stacks of books on the floor with a couple cracked open to pages that had been off dog-eared. Fu flew up them with a hurry from the downstairs once she realized what was happening. I'm sorry. He said last night that I'll get this all moved out. No, Yujito said, shaking her head. It'll take too long. He'll sleep in my room. Are you sure? Both Naruto and Fu asked in synchronism, albeit with varying degrees of speed and tone. Yeah, Yujito nodded, bringing Naruto along with her before he could say no. It's fine. My, how bold of you, kitten. To offer up your bed to such a strapping young lad. I'm shocked. Oh, shut up, Yujito said, most definitely not in the mood for her light teasing. What? Naruto asked. Yujito shook her head. It's nothing. She had to work on that. Although the things she let slip through her lips so far had been somewhat mild, there were times back in Cloud that things were let loose that she most certainly did not want known to the general public. Luckily, they were often so unbelievable that even if a chatty Kathy had heard her say it, nothing got sent around the village as a rumor. Yujito let him slide off her and into the bed she had claimed in a slump. He didn't even take off his clothes or get under the covers before his eyes rolled shut and his breathing slowed. The boy did have a point, you know, Matatabi said in her brain. And what was that? Yujito asked as she sat in a chair next the bed, cupping her cheek in her hands. You're always taking things a bit too seriously. There were other ways of letting him know you weren't going to have sex with him, than threatening his life. I didn't threaten it, Yujito thought back defensively. I wasn't seriously going to do it. That's not the point here. You're never going to make friends if you take things so seriously. The boy's got a good sense of humor. He's strong and handsome, if in a bit of a childish sort of way. I don't need friends, and I definitely don't need you playing matchmaking. I'm more than a decade older than him anyways. That's just wrong. Oh, kitten, I'm not telling you to fuck him. Just be nice to him. Try. You said you were going to try, didn't you? Yujito looked down on his sleeping face, contorted into a silly expression from being compressed on one side, and couldn't help but let a small smile come to her lips. The demon cat was right for once. Why would she act like a bitch to one of only maybe 9 people in the world who could really know what it was like to be in her shoes? She reached over and tucked his bangs behind his ears. And he was sort of cute, in a puppy dog sort of way. Chapter 5. Naruto was jolted awake from a strike to his thigh. He was stumbling on his bed halfway through a sad excuse for a fighting stance, delirious and tired by the time he realized his attacker was a girl a few years older than him smirking at him from the doorway to his room. On the bed was a remote of some sort, and the strike he had suffered felt distinctly remote-like. You sleep like a rock, Kuratsuchi said in a deriding tone. Naruto sighed and started to rub the sleep from his eyes. Why'd you wake me? We're gonna be late for the announcement. Get your ass out of bed and downstairs. Naruto lifted the inside of shirt a smidge and sniffed, then immediately recoiled from the smell. It was absolutely toxic. And it made sense too. He'd been wearing those clothes for 2 days straight, hadn't bathed for a while due to him being on the road with Jiraiya and then in a house with 5 other women that he didn't know, and there was also the fight with Yujito, which got out of hand in a hurry. Yeah, no. I need a shower. Kuratsuchi crossed her arms over her chest, deriding smile not slacking at all. You're damn right you do. Better make it quick though. It's almost noon. Naruto got up and stretched out his sore muscles once Kuratsuchi was out of his sight. Wait a minute, he thought suddenly, going stiff mid-pose. Who put my shirt back on for me? He remembered taking it off to train, and he remembered it was back on when he was on Yujito's back. Naruto shrugged. It's not like it mattered. He stumbled out of the room and went into the nearest bathroom, stripping off his clothes with slight consternation. The sweat had stuck them to his skin like an adhesive, and taking them off let a waft of stink to rise into the air. Without wasting another second, Naruto hopped into the shower and turned the nearest knob he could see, then let out a somewhat waifish scream as boiling hot water immediately pelted his body from above. That wasn't how the shower worked back at his apartment. Naruto started turning knobs whichever which way made the boiling stop. He successfully made side jets spring to life, started and stopped the bath nozzle, and tinted the water with the refreshingly nose-clogging scents of lavender. What the hell is wrong with this shower? Naruto ground out, taking a few moments to get the water levels to his liking, or more accurately to where he could put up with them. And if that meant showering himself off with the lukewarm water from side jets while cloaked in the choking scent of flowers, so be it. He grabbed the nearest bottle with the word soap on its label and rubbed its contents on his body, basking in the glory that was the feeling of odor being washed down the drain. Ever since being on the road with Jiraiya, he couldn't help but obtain a newfound appreciation for being clean, especially when he had to deal with old man stink for months on end. Though that didn't mean he wanted to be in that clusterfuck of a shower for a second longer than he had to. He stepped out as soon as he felt he was clean enough and nearly stumbled on the ground. Although a lot the aches and pains from his training session had vanished and he was less tired, there were still a lot of things that kept his physicality from being 100%. That, added with being in a boiling shower for too long, had left him woozy and unable to stand on his own. He grabbed onto the sink counter and held himself up as he stared into the mirror. Somehow, it hadn't fogged up, letting him see his face clearly. It was in that moment, while staring at his own face, logged down with water, and almost blacking out, that things finally started to click in place, for better or for worse. He was going to have to accept the reality he was in. He was going to have to accept that he was going to be living with Kuratsuchi and the rest of them. He wasn't going to find love. If he had any kids, they'd be kids from women he didn't even know. His freedom was restricted. He didn't even know how he was going to live his life from now on. It was probably going to change a lot, but how? Was he even to take missions anymore? Was he just a tool used to advance peace throughout the nations? He didn't know how he felt about those things. All those swirling negative emotions filled his brain as his body acclimated to the cold air. He didn't want to accept them. It was really hard for him to. But he had to, nonetheless. Just as the grips of cold reality were sinking into his heart, the door opened with a suddenness that jolted him out of his mind space. Kuratsuchi, squinting her eyes closed with an annoyed expression on her face, said, "When are you?" before mumbling off as her eyes were attracted downwards, where they stayed for several seconds. Naruto, having never been peeped on before, went deer in the headlights at this newfound situation for a few seconds before realizing the girl was straight up staring at him. Let's call it delicate fifth appendage. He grabbed a towel to cover himself with one hand and grabbed the nearest soap bottle with another one, flinging it at her head on reflex. It clocked her in the forehead and she stumbled out, accidentally closing the door behind her with a comically exaggerated grunt. Naruto dried himself off as well as he could and fastened the towel around his waist. He grabbed his head and shook it a few times. It wasn't the time to be getting down in the dumps. One step at a time. One day at a time. Just because his life was the way it was, didn't mean he couldn't have fun with it. And it just so happened that he now had another thing he could tease the slightly older girl with. He opened the door with a shit-eating grin on his face. Kuratsuchi was still rubbing her forehead with a wince when he said, "Wow, didn't know the princess from Rock was a pervert. Now I know to time out my showers when you're not around." She growled, an embarrassed blush staining her cheeks. "I tried knocking and you didn't answer. What, were you having an existential crisis in there?" Naruto's eyebrows furrowed. "What's an existential crisis?" Kuratsuchi huffed and picked herself up without managing to look him in the eye. "It's... never mind. Let's just get moving, alright?" she said quickly. Naruto shook his head. This was going to be too much fun. "No way. Not until you apologize," he said, crossing his arms over his chest and turning his chin away from her. It was Kuratsuchi's turn to look surprised. "What did I do?" she asked incredulously. "What did you do?" "Well, isn't it obvious?" Naruto asked with an outlandish flourish. "No. It's not." Naruto leaned over and got a little bit too much in her comfort bubble, while staring her straight in the eyes. "You stared." The blush that had abated somewhat over the seconds returned full force. "No, I didn't," she almost shouted. Naruto nodded knowingly. "Oh, yes, you did. And I'm not moving from this spot until you apologize." Her lips pressed themselves into a thin line just as fire erupted in her eyes. "I am not apologizing because I did not stare at your tiny little prick." Naruto leaned back and shrugged his shoulders. "Okay, if you don't want to apologize, that's fine." If Kuratsuchi was surprised he let it go that quickly, she didn't let it show. Her breathing began to get under control and she tried to say, "Well then, if that's it." "Unless," Naruto said, interrupting her. "That is, you want me to tell everyone that you peeked on me while I was naked, like a fucking pervert." Her mouth curled up in a snarl at the flip of a dime. "No one will believe you." "So you admit it?" Naruto said, pointing at her. "I admit nothing," Kuratsuchi all but screamed, her face starting to take a tinge of bluish purple. She looked like she was about to explode. And that wasn't a hyperbolic statement either. Naruto turned away, hand cupping his chin as he began to walk down the corridor. "Oh, I wonder how your dear old grandpa's going to react when I tell him you were raping me with your eyes while I was having an existential crisis. I can just feel the grandfatherly disappointment now." Putting aside the fact that he was using the term existential crisis without even knowing what it meant, Kuratsuchi's eyes widened and her skin blanched, turning the red blush into a sickly pink. "No! Don't do that!" Naruto froze and swiveled around, smirk threatening to split his face in two. "You know, it would be pretty outlandish of a guy to accuse a girl of peeking on him. But you're scared of your grandpa knowing that you did for some reason. Are you actually a pervert? Is peeking on men something you actually do?" The blush took over the blanch again. Her brain was starting to short-circuit. I was you're not I'm framed. I was framed. That's all." Naruto scratched his head in confusion as the gibberish the girl was spewing. After a few deep breaths to recollect herself, she crossed her arms over her chest and, looking away, said, "I'm sorry, okay?" "Oh, this was just too good." "Sorry for what, T?" Naruto asked, dragging the last word out. Her lips pressed themselves together into a thin line again. She started to murmur something out, but Naruto cupped a hand to his ear and said, "I'm sorry, what was that again? Couldn't hear you." "I'm sorry I stared at your dick," she shouted out in a burst, eyes pressed together. "Now get some fucking clothes on, you voyeur. We're out in 5. Maybe hanging out with Kuratsuchi wasn't going to be so bad after all. Making her mad was just too easy and too much fun. Naruto gave her a salute and continued walking down the hall. I'd hate to annoy the princess. And stop calling me princess. Naruto put a hand on his forehead to block out the sun as he stepped out the door and onto the street. Was it still the same day that he got into a fight with Yujito? Didn't feel like it. Apparently Kuratsuchi didn't take too kindly to his dawdling in front of the door and shoved him forward down the steps with the heel of her foot. Naruto sort of expected something along those lines, so he managed to catch and right himself rather quickly. The best thing about it was that it gave him an excuse to launch a quip at her. Whoa, princess. You're testy today. What's got your goat? Kuratsuchi, for her part, looked absolutely murderous. Walk, bastard. And don't call me that. Naruto dusted off the non-existent dust from his pants and jacket and looked back at her. Sorry, ma'am, your royalty, your highness, but the name stuck. You're princess for now on. Kuratsuchi almost stomped down the steps. Then think of another one, she ground out. Naruto shrugged. How about penis snatcher? Dick sniper? Phallic lock-on? Kuratsuchi let her disgust show quite clearly through her face. Do you even know what phallic means, shit for brains? Naruto nodded. Yeah, it means dick. Kuratsuchi huffed and took the lead. How the hell are you still alive? With the amount of people you've no doubt infuriated, you must be either made of lead or rubber to have made it through life so far. Naruto put both hands behind his head and walked forward with a kick in his step. Nope. Just gumption and stick-to-itiveness. And I'm more of a pranker than an infuriated person, you know. You just make too fun that I can't resist. Oh joy. Looking down the streets at the people milling about their day, Naruto realized that there wasn't any sort of hurry in their step to get anywhere. He thought that with the hurry he was awoken with, that they were already late for the announcement. What time is it anyway? He asked. We left at 11:30, Kuratsuchi said in a deadpan. Naruto patted his decidedly empty belly. He hadn't had a substantial breakfast. Have you eaten yet? Kuratsuchi slowed her walking so she could tilt her head and look at him with a single, wary eye. No. Ya hungry? Yeah, I guess. Dio wanna get something to eat? Kuratsuchi looked towards where the Kage administration was. We're going to make them wait if we do that. Naruto shrugged. So what? The announcement is at noon, and even if we are a little late, they'll just stall the speech a bit with some bullshit. Pervy Sage is probably going to do it, too. He's really good at stalling for time. What if we have lines to say? We're not going to have lines to say. We're here so everyone knows that it's possible that the six of us don't kill each other. And you're really tempting me to prove their prior assertions right, by the way. Kuratsuchi mumbled coldly. Anyway, we're up there to wave and look pretty. That means we have lunch privileges. You hungry for anything in particular? He asked, deciding their course of action on his own. Kuratsuchi shook her head and pinched the bridge of her nose. Anything quick. Naruto gave her a megawatt grin. A woman after my own heart. To ramen we go. Come on. With that, Naruto launched up the rooftops and started jumping his way to his favorite ramen restaurant. Kuratsuchi took a second to shake her head and jumped up after him. Even if war erupted tomorrow and they divorced, their marriage was going to last too long. Way too long. She had to admit that being treated with a mocking hostility was refreshing compared to how people usually interacted with her back at her home, but it was the sort of thing that she only really wanted to experience once. Sure, eating exotic foods is nice when you've been fed only oatmeal your whole life, but when you start puking your guts out, you come to understand that things are exotic for a reason. It only took a few minutes to get to Naruto's favorite restaurant, a small ramen stand nestled into a nondescript street. It didn't look like it was bustling with activity, or that it was all too different from any other ramen place. No advertisements of challenged meals or any shtick to speak of. She wondered why he seemed so happy to be going back. She found out almost immediately when he opened the flaps and was greeted by the staff like he'd been raised by them. Banter flew back and forth almost immediately with smiles and faux consternation abound. It took her a while to realize that the slight changes in the way he acted was his real self, him around the people he was comfortable with. Sitting next to him made her feel like a person who was witnessing something she didn't have a right to. Like a stranger invited to a party with only close friends who have known each other since childhood. For a few seconds, she felt no small amount of jealousy to the amount of ease and comfort with which they regarded each other. And then she remembered him mocking her for wearing a dress and threatening to tell her grandpa that she peeked on him. Any sort of deep thoughts about the nature of his character was put on the side burner for the sake of rekindling her already intense dislike for him. And you know, the old man said with his back turned to the duo as he scooped out noodles from a pot. That girl from Sand, the one that was down in the dumps, ended up taking the bill. You should thank her when you have the chance. Oh ho ho ho, I said with an impish eyebrow wiggle. And who was that girl anyway? Am I going to have to worry about more blonde-haired brats running around, making a mess of the village? Naruto laughed nervously and rubbed the back of his neck. Kuratsuchi couldn't be sure of the sparse lighting, but she could swear she saw a light blush pop up on his cheeks. He either had a thing for Temari, which was unlikely, or the ribbing that the young woman was giving him had started to become normalized, and he was just reacting the way he did when he was a kid. From what Kuratsuchi could tell so far, the woman was kind of like a surrogate older sister, and the old man filled the kindly grandpa role for him. Kuratsuchi allowed a devilish smirk to grow on her face. If she wasn't going to capitalize on this moment, then who would? Aw, Nara honey, Kuratsuchi moaned out in a perfectly acted-out hyperbolic show of frustration. While she did that, she hugged both her arms around his bicep and leaned her upper body against his. He froze from the surprised mid-slurp and his face grew heated when she pressed her head against his. He also wasn't good with women touching him. Good to know. She filed that little bit of knowledge in the back of her mind for later. When were you gonna introduce me to them? She whined out with a much higher-pitched voice. She wasn't sure how it sounded to them, but her own eardrums were begging for mercy, so she could only hope that they were feeling the worst of it. While she might not have liked the curriculum for the female-specific tasks, she did find out that she was a natural Shakespearean from them. No role was too difficult for her to do. And the annoying girlfriend routine was practically second-hand by now from all the impressions her friends enjoyed. The noodles hanging out of his mouth fell to the broth with a small plopping sound. His eyes were wide open and his mouth was pressed in a surprised line, trying to keep all the food firmly in his mouth. He was surprised. Good. She was in control of the situation. He made a hard gulp and dumbly said, "Huh?" Kuratsuchi fake-chided, putting a finger to the corner of his mouth, where there was a small dribble of broth leaking. She wiped the liquid up and said, "What did I say about table manners?" Switching to a slightly sultrier tone before putting her broth-soaked digit in her mouth. The girl made a show of making sloppy, sucking, licking sounds as she thrust a finger in and out of her mouth at a slow pace. That makes you a bad boy. And you know what happens when you're a bad boy. Kuratsuchi's eyes twitched over to the two ramen chefs for a quarter of a second. Their eyes were wide with their mouths hanging wide open. The ramen stand could be on fire, and they wouldn't notice. Perfect. Just perfect. Water you Naruto tried to get out a question before Kuratsuchi took the saliva-soaked finger away from her mouth and pressed it to his in a hushing motion. Shh. Oh honey, darling, my love, why are you treating me so coldly? And after the sight you treated me to this morning. Turned her head away and to the side as her cheeks lit up a crimson glow while Tsuchi went back to the broth, unsure of what to say or how to act in such a situation. Looking over to the two chefs' reactions, Naruto's eyes lit up with realization as he thrust his head away from her hand and looked at the now silent ramen chefs. His eyes pressed into lines as he glared at the she-devil. "Oh, you she-devil," he muttered out. Without breaking character, she smiled a smile that would put Satan to shame and sucked on her lower lip in a slow and sensual way as she growled out a playful meal. Naruto slapped a hand on the table and said, "This is just a whole big misunderstanding," he said desperately, trying to piece back together the respect of his pseudo-family that was lost from essentially bringing a whore to the dinner table. "What's a big misunderstanding?" Kuratsuchi asked helplessly. "You said it yourself this morning. I'm just a pervert who gets off on." She didn't get another word out as Naruto hurriedly slapped a hand over her mouth and grinned nervously at the two over the counter as they tried to puzzle out the situation. Naruto was caught in between his inability to lie and his not wanting and Tsuchi to misunderstand the situation. She's. Well, she's not lying, but she's not telling the truth either. Kuratsuchi wiggled out of his grasp. What's that supposed to mean, honey? Even after you made me admit my perversions, you're acting like this morning didn't even happen. That's because it didn't happen. At least not the way you're making it sound like. Kuratsuchi, still smiling like the devil, held her head in her hands and put her elbows on the table, looking to Ayam now instead. "And what do you think happened, huh?" Ayam started sputtering out in surprise, but was interrupted by Kuratsuchi. "You know." Kuratsuchi tilted her head down and gave the ramen chef's daughter a knowing look. I can confirm that darling here has the largest chakra capacity I've ever seen in my life. Ayam's embarrassed face slowly turned to confusion. Wait. What's that supposed to mean? Naruto was looking at her too, not knowing where she was going with that one. Kuratsuchi's smile grew until it was nearly splitting her face open. She leaned forward and put a hand to separate Naruto's view of her mouth. It means, she whispered loudly so that everybody could hear, completely nullifying the utility of her hand cover, that he has a big D. Okay then, Naruto said loudly, slapping a hand over her mouth once more. This time though, he didn't let off and even dragged her to a stand away from the ramen restaurant. Thanks for the food, old man, just put it on my tab and don't be late for the announcement, he said as he walked off the restaurant with a patently fake smile, leaving behind two befuddled and embarrassed shopkeepers. Once they were far enough away, Naruto let his hand fall from her face and turned seriously to her. What the hell was that? Her smile had abated somewhat, but the evil was still there. You wanna play games, okay? Just don't cry when the tables are turned. Naruto raised a finger and looked like he was about to wax indignant before his digit lost its rigidity, and his back fell forward. His face was a mixture of frustration and annoyance. He spat out a curse and straightened out his back. Okay, fair enough. I was okay with letting this stay as a one-off, but if you want to play, then we're going to play. Now, where do you want to go now? His eyes were squinting and the smile on his face was a challenge just waiting to be claimed. Kuratsuchi smiled back. You're gonna help me pick out an outfit for the announcement. One of his eyebrows rose. Do we have enough time? She nodded. For what I'm planning, yes. Naruto's eye twitched something fierce. In front of him, in the store he had made fun of Kuratsuchi just that morning through a clone, were 5 or so women with their eyes wide open as they looked at something they couldn't believe. To be fair to his situation, he had known from the first sentence out of Kuratsuchi's mouth what her plan was. He had contented himself with the conviction that he could deftly get out of her machinations and put her in the center of embarrassment instead. Standing, having just had his transformation explosively undone and still wearing the sparkly, ruby-red evening dress with matching high heels, he had to admit that he had underestimated her. Not only had she nullified the cloth-shredding seal he always had on hand, which would have rendered her half-naked in front of the patrons, but she had also maneuvered him in front of other shoppers before applying a counter on his female transformation, leaving him cross-dressing in front of the women. When he changed clothes to that of a woman while he was Naruto, he had been planning on using it as a way to sneak the cloth-shredding seal into the she-devil's clothes without her noticing. She noticed. She counteracted it. Then she counterattacked his counterattack. He quickly shuffled his way to the changing room, unable to speak to the women, much less look them in the eye, and stripped out of the evening dress like his life depended on it as soon as he was in a booth. It was only then that he realized that someone had taken his clothes. And so, he was standing in the box, in his underwear, with nothing left to put on. It was her again. The sound of barely constrained giggling was his only warning before the evening dress too was grabbed off the floor. He stood in that small changing room for all of 5 seconds, mind racing with all the things he could do to get out of that situation with his pride still intact, and came up blank. Hey princess? He asked feebly. Yeah? She asked, barely able to keep herself from full belly laughing. If I admit defeat here, will you give me back my clothes? He heard her pace back and forth a few times, mulling over his proposal. I don't know. That offer isn't really enticing, you know. What if I complimented you every day for the rest of your life? She stopped pacing. Oh? Give me a taste and I'll see for myself if it's worth the trouble. Naruto had to bite the inside of his cheek from frowning too hard. It would have impeded his speech otherwise. You are a goddess and human incarnate. I don't know. Sounds a bit sick, puppy. You are the most beautiful woman alive. Any man would be lucky to have you, Naruto said in complete monotone. You're going to have to be a bit more enthused than that. Naruto ground his teeth together. You are the wisest, smartest, strongest, most benevolent woman no human being alive. I am lucky to be in your presence. I would prostrate myself before you, but I have no room. If I could, I would start a religion in your honor. She chuckled a bit from outside the changing room. Here's the thing, I can tell you don't really mean any of that stuff. Naruto practically snarled and opened the door with a suddenness Kuratsuchi was not expecting. He, while still only wearing his boxer shorts, walked up to her so fast that she started backpedaling on instinct until she couldn't anymore. She ended up with her back pressed against the wall, and her arms full of the clothes Naruto had been wearing. He was close, almost dangerously so. A sudden jerk from either of them, and they'd be touching in a most intimate way. For a few seconds he did nothing but stare into her eyes, face stern, but not overly frustrated or angry. He leaned in even closer, the breath coming from his nose tickling her lips. She gulped hard and could feel sweat begin to percolate on her brow. Was this really happening? Did she push him too far? You, he said slowly from the pit of his stomach, have beautiful eyes. Kuratsuchi blinked once, twice, 3 times, before her voice came to her. What? She asked. He looked down to the clothes in her arms. Was that good enough? I am. What? The compliment? Naruto forcefully reiterated. Kuratsuchi's brain kick-started back into position. Her face was hot. Was she blushing? Why was she blushing? Hurriedly, she shoved the clothes in her arms onto him and stalked out of the changing room, where there was starting to be a small, somewhat entertained crowd of women standing around and leering at him. He gave them a happy-go-lucky smile, gave a bullshit excuse, and went back into the changing room. Kuratsuchi was waiting with her arms crossed over her chest in front of the building when Naruto exited as well. He had a bag with the store's logo in his hand. His face was sour and indignant. They made me buy the dress, by the way, he muttered in greeting. Apparently, they don't take too kindly to cross-dressing. She shrugged like it didn't concern her. Are we going into administration now? She asked, refusing to meet his gaze. He smiled like a sadist. Not by a long shot. She glanced at him with equal parts apprehension and confusion. Naruto Uzumaki. Kuratsuchi screamed as she jumped away from ninja dogs doing their best to play catch the rogue ninja. The Inuzuka clan member next to Naruto leaned his way a few inches and asked, "Are you sure this is okay?" Naruto nodded emphatically. "Oh yeah, she's always admired the Inuzuka clan. I think this is the happiest I've ever seen her, in fact," he said as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Once I get away from these fucking mongrels, I'm going to tear you open 3 new assholes, then I'm gonna shove your head up all of them." "That doesn't seem physically possible," Inuzuka muttered. Naruto shook his head. "No, it doesn't." "Are you sure she's okay with this? It doesn't seem like she's too happy." Naruto nodded and clicked his tongue like he had forgotten to mention something prior in their conversation. "Yeah, she's a realist. She just doesn't feel right if she's not in character." Inuzuka shrugged. "As long as there's no diplomatic incident and the dogs get their exercise." Naruto grinned. "I should start trying to apply that philosophy in my life. Simple. Effective. Straight to the point. I hope you get ball cancer." "Aren't you cutting it a bit too close for comfort as far as the announcement goes?" Naruto asked, ignoring the screaming girl entirely. The Inuzuka member shrugged. "I'm not going. Probably not important anyway." Naruto nodded as he gazed at the girl from the rock, spewing philippics that would have made pervy Sage cringe. "Yeah, you've got a point there." Team 8, composed of Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Aburame, and Hinata Hyuga, were all walking down the street on their way to see what the Hokage was going to say when they happened on a most peculiar sight. Right smack dab in the middle of the street, what appeared to be a man was hanging upside down from his feet attached to a lamppost. This man was covered in a layer of sticky tar with a layer of white feathers on top. On the crown of his head was tied a red rubber glove cut in such a way that the fingers were arranged in a mohawk-type pattern, and his mouth was covered by a party hat painted yellow with a black line going across it horizontally, giving a beak-like look to it. "Hey guys," the man mumbled. "Think you could help me down?" Kiba squinted at the man for a few seconds before seeing the whisker marks on his cheeks and his light blue eyes. "Shit man, is that Naruto?" he asked. The bugs around Shino buzzed for a few seconds. He gave a silent nod, confirming who it was. Hinata blushed up a storm as Kiba cut the wire holding Naruto's feet in place. He fell in a clump on the ground and got up with all the speed one would expect from someone covered in tar. Kiba crossed his arms over his chest and shook his head. "Should have known that the first time I met you in 2.5 years and you're like this." "Who'd you piss off this time?" Naruto puffed out his chest indignantly. "Don't think this is a one-way thing. I'm gonna get the person who did this to me tenfold." "I don't doubt it," Kiba mumbled. "So who was it anyway? He must have been pretty good to get one up on you." "She is," a voice from behind them said haughtily. The 3 of them turned around to see a triumphant-looking girl wearing the traditional shinobi wear from rock. Kiba would have guessed she was a boy were it not for the clarification sentence she gave. No small amount of that was due to the tussed-up hair, clothing covered in dog bites, wild look in her eye, and the overwhelming scent of Inuzuka clan dogs on her body. Kiba spoke to her, but her attention was squarely away from the dog boy. Instead, she was studying the girl with long violet hair, red face, and body language that said she was about to faint. And it had only started once she had been confronted with the tarred and feathered Naruto. That could only mean one thing. "Where are you guys going?" she asked the three of them, cutting Kiba off mid-sentence. "To the Hokage's announcement," Shino said without missing a beat, cutting off Kiba's follow-up indignant riposte. Kuratsuchi sauntered up to the still reeling Naruto, sidled up to him, and planted a quick kiss on his non-tarred cheek. "Well, don't be late, Sakura, the surprise is going to be great," she said just before body flickering the both of them away. The three members of Team 8 were, for their part, very confused. Naruto shoved Kuratsuchi off of him as soon as he could. "What was that about?" She stumbled away with her evil grin on full display. "Wanted to make your girlfriend jealous," she said simply. Naruto's eyes scrunched in confusion. "What the hell are you talking about?" She looked at him quizzically. "The girl with the long hair? That wasn't your girlfriend?" Naruto shook his head emphatically. "No. It wasn't. That was Hinata. And Sakura isn't even my girlfriend." This statement confused Kuratsuchi greatly until a flicker of realization came to her eyes. "Oh, wait. Then does that mean this Sakura chick doesn't even like you?" Naruto's visible cheeks colored red as he averted his gaze. "Yeah, so what? We're teammates." Kuratsuchi covered her mouth to contain her laughter. "Did you get friend-zoned? Oh, you poor, sweet child." Naruto growled and affronted on her, though she did not back up in the slightest. "Don't talk about shit that you don't know anything about. It's more complicated than that." Kuratsuchi shrugged. "Whatever gets you to sleep at night," she said as she turned her body towards administration. "Seriously though, we should get going. We're totally late." Naruto clapped a hand on her shoulder and shook his head evilly. "Oh no, we're making one more stop before we go." Kuratsuchi's grin rose as tall as his challenge. "Okay. Better not cry to your mommy when I beat your ass, though." Naruto's smile matched her own. "My mom's dead." She shrugged. "So is mine." Kakashi's feet landed on the soft grass just before three wooden posts protruding from the ground. The field was nostalgic for all sorts of reasons and brought back many memories he would rather remain quashed in the small parts of his mind, but he wasn't standing in that field for them. He was standing in front of the two teenagers he had been looking for the better of 15 minutes. At least Naruto was predictable in some senses. He didn't know what he would have done if Naruto and Kuratsuchi were somewhere only they knew about. Though if it weren't for the scent of Naruto that he had become associated with, he wouldn't have known it was him to begin with. Although most of the feathers had been brushed off, Naruto was still blackened with tar, and now had pieces of twigs and leaves stuck to his body. Next to him was a vaguely human-shaped thing he surmised must be Kuratsuchi. She was covered head to toe in paints, primarily pinks and lavenders, and for some reason was wearing a tutu. The two of them were laughing between panting breaths as they laid against the same wooden pole in the middle. Kakashi sighed and took out his porn as he beheld the two. "Hello, Naruto," he said evenly. Naruto's attention flickered to the scarecrow, signaling cheerfulness to come out from hiding. "Oh, hey Kakashi-sensei. How's life been?" "I've gotten." Naruto paused and grunted as he brought himself back up. "I've gotten a lot stronger over my training trip. I could take those bells all by myself now if I wanted to." Kuratsuchi crackled up with renewed laughter. "Wow, you leaf ninjas sure have some weird practices." Naruto turned around to look at her. "What's so weird about snatching bells?" Kuratsuchi's half-lidded eyes and slightly open mouth were indications of her being drunk off of laughter. She was absolutely giddy with herself. "Oh. Thought you said balls." Naruto cracked up laughing as well, making Kakashi almost sigh. "And she wasn't the only one drunk off happy either. A lot of people are looking for you too," Kakashi tried to say as menacing as he could. The blonde teenager in question shrugged. Yeah, I know." He offered a hand to the prone girl, who accepted it and pulled herself up. "We're going." Kakashi shook his head and put two hands on either of their shoulders. "Brace yourself," he said. The two teenagers stumbled to the floor, sprinkling flecks of paint and smears of tar all over the ground. It was rather cramped, with all the world leaders, the members of the contract, and now Kakashi standing with his hands covered in either black tar or multicolored paint in the middle of it all. The faint booming of Jiraiya's enhanced voice could be heard up on top of the roof. As soon as he could, Kakashi's body flickered out of the room. Tsunade was the first one to move, standing Naruto up by the scruff of his collar and looking him straight in the eye. "Where have you been?" she asked furiously. Naruto shrugged in a show of mass disrespect. "I got lost on the road of life." Tsunade growled at him slowly as she stared at him in the eyes. He could tell she was deliberating between chewing him out right then and there and waiting for when there was more time. When she didn't respond right away, Fu stepped forward and asked what happened to you two, with a worried quaver in her voice. Tsunade let go of him and stalked back to her desk while he scratched the back of his head, with a toothy grin showing on his face. "It's… you'd have to be there to get it." By now, Kuratsuchi was up and at him too with a comparative smile. "But what really matters is that I won." Naruto play-scoffed. "You wish, princess." She crossed her arms over her chest and leaned back a little bit. "I literally tarred and feathered you. That can't be beaten. And I got you to fall into a Punjabi trap filled with princess paint. I think that's a top. Is not. Is too. Enough," Tsunade barked out. "Transform so you two look like normal people, then get your asses up there right now." Naruto's and Kuratsuchi's spines stiffened, and they both raised a hand up to their foreheads to salute. "Yes sir /Rido." Out of earshot, Ai leaned over to Inoki and murmured, "Your granddaughter's excitable, isn't she?" There was a mocking grin painted over his face which didn't need to be seen to be known. "Says the man whose Jinchuriki had a meltdown this morning," Inoki quipped back. They both flinched when soft hands with iron grips clasped on their shoulders. Mei leaned forward with a dead smile and slowly said, "Era? Do I hear the gossiping of schoolgirls? It must just be me, right? There's no way that two heads of state could be measuring their dicks while in earshot of me, right?" Inoki raised both hands in the air, not perturbed by the hand digging into his shoulder. "I'm not the one who started it." Mei let go of their shoulders with a sigh. "If this is going to work, we need to at least act cordial. Try not to keep score over whose girl is best. It's unsightly." Fu flitted over to them. "What's going on?" "Nothing is going on," Tsunade said with barely restrained anger. "Except for you six marching your asses up the roof and waving at the crowds while Jiraiya does his routine. Got it?" Yujito puffed out of existence as her body flickered up to the roof where Jiraiya was. Tsunade pinched the bridge of her nose out of frustration. As a group, Temari was the next one to body flicker alone, causing Tsunade to sit down lest she begin a rampage. "I'm just gonna go, then, if that's okay," Fu said quietly before puffing away. "See ya, boys," Mei said huskily. She was halfway through blowing a kiss when she puffed away too. Naruto nudged Kuratsuchi in the elbow. "Guess it's just us, then." She shook her head, saying nope, just you, before puffing away as well. "Got," Naruto blurted out. "She didn't wait for me." "Go!" Naruto waved Tsunade off. "Yeah, I got it. I got it." The six of them stood side by side on top of the Kage administration with Jiraiya's towering form directly behind them, going through a long preamble about the horrors of war and what could be done to take steps towards peace. The crowd under them were not just of civilian nature alone, meaning that the streets, the walls, the rooftops, antennas, pillars, and even a large bird were all used as purchases for shinobi to use. There was a sea of people, all with expectant, annoyed, or wary eyes directed towards what was happening. Many had guessed how the speech was going to turn out, but not a single one was right. The Jinchuriki of the cloud, Yujito ni. The ones who have not faced off against her know at least her might. She is not only an accomplished kunoichi of one of the 5 great villages, but also one of the most powerful people alive, having mastered her beast's power. Jiraiya shouted out, beginning to name the people on the roof with grandiose. As he paused, there was a smattering of uneasy murmuring in the crowds of the people. The eyes of the people reflected equal parts awe and fear. Yujito shifted her weight from side to side. She didn't know how uncomfortable it was going to be being stared at by a whole village of people until it was happening. To her, all their eyes were searching her up and down, looking for any weak points that they could try to exploit. Her eyes flickered over to the end of the line, where Naruto was. His stature was straight and tall with a beaming smile on his face. He wasn't only okay with the attention, he basked in it like a cat would in sunlight. She had the feeling that if he was standing next to her, she'd be able to rest easier, prompting a particularly lascivious assault from the demon in her body. Daughter of the previous leader of Sand and sister to the current leader, Temari no Sabaku. Not only of a noble bloodline and proud posture, this girl, no older than 18, is one of the youngest among the sand population of shinobi to attain that rank and has mastered the usage of wind arts to a degree few ever have. Temari was used to such gazes, not only from the people staring at her on the streets, but because she was sometimes invited to the speeches her father gave, few that he did. She had been shy the first few times, but had grown used to the states over time. As she looked down and back at the people of the leaf, even recognizing a few of them, a strange flicker of hope began to kindle in her chest. There had already been hiccups aplenty, but if the contract worked as intended, it could mean a demilitarization of the entire continent. It could mean that a profession that included lying, cheating, stealing, and killing would no longer be looked up to as a noble one. And besides, her day-to-day life had been, until then, sorely lacking the sort of unrestrained joviality that Naruto often brought along with him. It could be a nice change of pace to travel with such a man. Jinchuriki of the waterfall, Fu. Unknown to many as she had been sequestered in her village as a deterrent and a defensive weapon. Along with Yujito, also one of the most powerful people on the continent with an impressive host of abilities rare for even a demon host. Fu smiled brightly and clearly for all the people in front of her. She raised her hands high above her head and waved them back and forth. A small cheer rang out from somewhere in the crowd, followed by another, then another, until there was a small roar of applause and cheer from them. Considering the amount of people there, the noise was lackluster, but it lightened many of their spirits. Her spirit, which only possibly matched their own Jinchuriki's, was infectious. The girl wasn't sure about the prospect of universal peace. What truly excited her was the idea of traveling across the continent with people who could have understood her plight even marginally. Even if most of them were downers, it was going to be fun being with them. Especially Naruto and now maybe Kuratsuchi. They looked like they knew how to create their own fun. Exactly her kind of people. Leader of the rebellion against the Bloody Mist, Mei Terumi. Having mastered 2 different types of bloodline releases, she has led a new future to her village. Already, her populace has praised her for the practices she has put in place. Another one of the most powerful people on the continent, and a born leader. Mei smiled serenely as she waved to the crowd sedately. She'd been through the rigmarole of addressing populaces and had every part of her body perfectly practiced towards lifting the people's spirits. A whistle rang out from the audience, making her smile draw upwards ever so slightly. Soon, there was more whistling, though this was quieted much more harshly by the attending partners of the whistlers than Fu's exuberant waving. Granddaughter of the current Sasuke of Rock, Kuratsuchi. With a bloodline limit of her own that she has mastered, she has won the hearts of the people of Rock. Noticing that that was all the introduction she was going to get, Kuratsuchi turned back at the man and gave him a death glare, not that it made him falter all too much. She turned around suddenly, stomped up to the railing, put a foot on the top and struck a single fist in the air. "Let's hear some noise!" she shouted out at the top of her lungs. At first, there was only stifled laughter in the audience, but there was soon a raving cheer going across the sea of people. People began to compete with how loud their voices could be, and even stark haters of Hidden Rock felt a light grin tug their lips. She crossed her arms and stomped her way back in line, leaving a line of colorful paint on the ground unseen by the people. As soon as she was back next to Naruto, she nudged him in the shoulder. "Beat that," she said in challenge. He grinned. "Oh, I will." Naruto Uzumaki. Many of you all know him as a prankster, a hell-raiser, a loudmouth, or a little brat. Naruto turned back and gave the old man the stink eye. Jiraiya had to pause as a slight chuckle overcame his seriousness for a second. As soon as that happened, there was a smattering of laughter among the audience too. Jiraiya straightened himself out and put his serious mask back on. And yet, many of the people here today have heard of him. You have seen him during the exam several years ago. You've heard tales of his exploits, of his relationships, of his very goals, with doubt and disbelief. But any of you that have met him know about him. You know that he will be the last one to give in. He won't ever give up, because that's his shinobi way. That's the way he lives his life. He's grown now and has been trained by myself all the way. The reason for this training is to help him contain the 9-tailed demon fox sealed in his gut. And just like that, there was silence in the audience. From disbelief and confusion from the younger generation and shock from the older. Thanks to the silence, Jiraiya's voice was all the more louder. Many of you already know this, but the younger generation does not. Naruto Uzumaki had the Kyuubi sealed in his gut by the 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze, with the help of his wife, Kushina Uzumaki. That is the way that he defeated the Kyuubi, as a tailed beast can never be truly defeated through conventional means. Kuratsuchi felt her stomach tighten up. All of a sudden, there was a constellation of dots in her mind, trying to make connections as fast as she could and not liking the result that they were coming out to. And if any of you are wondering what happened to the fourth Hokage's secret wife, Kushina Uzumaki, well, she died protecting her newborn son. Everyone's eyes grew in the audience at the reveal of this new information. A few had already figured out what Jiraiya was going to say next, but most were just too shocked by the information to do anything, Kuratsuchi included. But worry not, for her son has survived all this time. His name is Naruto Uzumaki. Kuratsuchi's stomach twisted itself in knots. She couldn't move anymore. She couldn't think anymore. She couldn't even hear the cheer raised throughout the crowd as Naruto incited more excitement than she ever could. She didn't see the triumphant smile on his face, and she didn't feel the nudge against her shoulder from him. There was no entrapping her thoughts and movements. The chains that bound her were securely made from forged and hardened rage, long thought to have been bottled back in the recesses of her mind, only to find it brought back with enough force to temporarily paralyze her body. Jiraiya began to lay out the plan of the countries, but she didn't hear them. Eventually, the leaders of the respective villages popped up there behind them, but she didn't feel them. Naruto leaned to the side and asked if she was okay, but she didn't even notice him. She couldn't. How could she? How would she? Because she was standing next to the son of the man who killed her mother. Chapter 6. She snapped back to reality when she felt the cold, withered hand of her grandfather grab her elbow suddenly. Her breath got caught in her throat, and her spine snapped straight. "Don't make a scene," he hissed so lowly that it was only audible to her. The sound of her teeth grinding together assaulted her inner ears. She couldn't unclench her teeth no matter how hard she tried. Her face was screwed up in anger, though she doubted anyone noticed. All the people in the crowds were looking at each other or milling about with any number of differing emotions on their face. She only had one emotion available to her. But Gramps, if you make a single sound more, I will make you so heavy that you won't be able to stand for weeks. Kuratsuchi bit back her tongue and closed her eyes. She felt a hot wetness on her cheeks. Was she crying? Too many emotions that she had thought were long gone began to bubble up in her chest. Sadness, anger, frustration, fear, doubt, and above all, helplessness. As she glared at the teenager next to her, him waving out to the crowd and blowing raspberries in an utterly humiliating display of juvenility and childishness, Kuratsuchi felt the most intense sensation of helplessness well up inside of her. No, that's not right. She wasn't helpless anymore. She was a fucking adult now. She could do whatever she damn well pleased. And it would damn well please her to shove a katana down his throat and look him in the eyes as he choked on his own blood. Oh, it would please her greatly. Mei, being the one standing on the other side of Kuratsuchi, was the first one to sense the incredibly fluctuating chakra signature to her side. Mei glanced over and saw streams of tears pouring out of the girl's eyes like miniature waterfalls and a face that was more tortured than many of the people she'd seen dying on the battlefield. Something was very wrong. As soon as she noticed this, she walked up behind Jiraiya and quietly said, "We have a problem," interrupting his speech mid-sentence. Without changing his facial expression in the slightest, Jiraiya nodded ever so slightly, and immediately pivoted away from the point he was making with promises of more minute details trickled down by the elite shinobi. By the time they had turned around, there were only 4 members of the contract standing in a line. Kuratsuchi was gone, having brushed past her grandfather, leaving him flat on his ass on the ground next to a confused Naruto. "What's going on?" he asked, looking over to where he had last seen Kuratsuchi's fleeing form. Jiraiya took charge of the group, saying everyone, body flicker down to the room right now, in a stern and domineering voice. The leaders and their charges paired up without a second buffer and vanished from the rooftop, leaving a citizenry confused as to what happened. Soon, they would begin to filter back to their homes with confusion, doubt, and trepidation in their hearts. Never before had something like this happened. Never mind a 6-way marriage, few remembered a time when 5 kage were in the same general vicinity, and there wasn't a war going on. The general populace would debate, argue, and whisper in hushed tones as to how they thought it was going to shake out. There would be 100 different conspiracy theories by the time the sun set, and 100 more by the time the sun rose. Some could agree, some were indifferent, and others still couldn't accept allying with any of the other big 5. The next week or so were of vital importance to the people's perception of how things might shake out. Naruto almost stumbled forward, but he was held steady by the grip of Tsunade. As soon as Inoki was down, she said, "What's going on?" with a hint of frustration in her voice. Things had been going so well. What could have happened to exacerbate the ire of the girl from Rock? Honestly, it was that girl that made her the most worried for the future of the alliance. The rest were either staunchly pragmatic or indifferent to the contract, but Kuratsuchi was excitable and acted on emotion in a way not wholly reminiscent of the teenager whose shoulder she was grabbing. So when Kakashi brought the two of them in front of her, covered in tar and paint, but laughing their asses off, she couldn't help but feel a load lift off her shoulders a little bit. If they could work things out, then maybe peace could be achieved. Now, the weight came crashing back down, heavier than ever. Inoki brushed himself off grumpily and stood as straight as his age would permit with his arms crossed over his chest. Oh, don't tell me your spy master didn't tell you about this. Anyone knows that there's been an impromptu Kage meeting since a few weeks ago. If your spy master doesn't know what's going on, then he isn't worth his salt. Tsunade desperately wanted to admonish him for shifting the topic of conversation, but she knew that there wasn't time for that. Instead, she turned to look at Jiraiya and lifted an eyebrow. He splayed his hands to the side and shrugged. Of course I knew that there was a meeting in Leaf, but I had no idea what it was about. I only just managed to pull up dossiers on the 5 women, and I only had about half a day to do it. And? May asked. And what? May sighed. Since his lordliness, she pointed at the grumpy Inoki, who was turning his head away from all of them, isn't talking. What do you know about her? She was fine when she got up there and suddenly, her chakra went wild. Wait, what? Naruto asked, interjecting himself in the conversation. Why did that happen? That's what we're trying to figure out, kid, I muttered. Well, it has to be something you said, Jiraiya Shibuki said. There's nothing else that could have happened to have upset her. Everyone turned to look at the slight man, making him almost flinch. He wasn't used to speaking out too often, and everyone in the room had a sort of unassailable vibe going around them. Well, Jiraiya, Tsunade said, turning to him. What did you say? His face had been screwed up in concentration for a little bit when she looked at him. I don't know. Her introduction wasn't as long, but I couldn't find anything as noteworthy as the others. And she wouldn't go bipolar over a shortened introduction, Temari quipped. Perhaps it was something to do with Naruto's introduction? Gaara put forward. If it was happening around that time, then it might not have had to do specifically with her. Jiraiya looked like a man scrambling for his own sanity. But I didn't do anything then either. I introduced him to the populace, made them feel for him, then I told them. Jiraiya began to trail off as he began to make connections between what he thought were once disparate facts. He turned to Inoki, who was still shoving his nose the other way. The old man's refusal to speak wasn't just due to his stubbornness. He was ashamed? Inoki, Jiraiya said slowly. You didn't. I didn't have any other choice, child. Inoki shouted. There was no one else eligible other than her, and I made sure that my son wouldn't tell her the truth. Well, it looks like that went by swimmingly, Jiraiya shouted back. How could you think this was a good idea? I didn't have any other choice, child. Inoki reiterated. You think I wanted to do it this way? Anybody else would have flat out refused me or tried to kill him. At least this way, I had some control over her. Except it looks like you don't, old man. The contract was originally made 16 years ago, child. Hey! The room went quiet at the sudden outburst from Yujito. Her mouth was curled in a snarl and her eyes looked murderous. I, for one, am quite annoyed at being left out of the loop. Would you kindly explain to me just what's going on? Inoki crossed his arms and turned away from them while Jiraiya pinched the bridge of his nose. Kuratsuchi's mother, Jiraiya, breathed out. Died in one of the battles. Naruto's father was present. She didn't just die while he was there, Inoki spat out. She was killed by his hand. The room went quiet as the inhabitants digested the meaning of what was said. Naruto was struck so hard by it that his knees fell out from under him, forcing him to sit down in a chair. Fu's eyebrows scrunched together. That's it. Fucked, Temari finished. Like really fucked. May crossed her arms and huffed. Oh, please. This continent has been ravaged by war for so long that everyone has buried their friends or loved ones. Honestly, she's being quite petty. Have you ever lost anyone? Yujito asked. May's eyes narrowed as she looked at the militaristic woman. Is that supposed to be a joke? I grew up on a battlefield. Of course I've lost loved ones. And I bet no one asked you to marry the son of the ones who killed your friends. May waved it off. The sins of the father should not carry on to the son. It shouldn't matter what his father did to her mother. especially not when the balance of the world hangs precariously over the tides of war. Even so, Yujito offered. Would you be able to marry the son of a man who killed a person you loved? Mei tapped a finger against her elbow rhythmically. If I had to. She gritted out. Yujito closed her eyes and sighed. Well, it doesn't sound like Kuratsuchi lived on a battlefield. Any of the fighting she did, I doubt it was to destabilize the balance of the Big Five. At this point, she's actually rather naive to how the world works. Can you blame her for running? Yes, I can and I will. Even one naive as her has to know how important this is. Mei took a moment to take a deep breath and collect herself. I doubt we were the only ones who saw her outburst. Why are we even debating over this? We should be trying to find her. Naruto stood up suddenly, a resolute look shining on his face. You're right. We should go. Split up? Fu asked. Or maybe a tracker? She trailed off as she saw the fleeing tail end of Naruto burst out of the door and down the hallway of the building, an idea of where to find her already in mind. No! Shit. He's gone. Tsunade turned to Jiraiya. Do you have any tracking toads? He nodded, already biting his thumb. Yup, he said before slamming a palm on the table, releasing a puff of smoke and revealing a small toad smoking a pipe far too large for it. Watcha me out here. Do you smell the paint? He asked. The toad grew indignant. What do you take me for? Of course I can. Well, Jiraiya said, showing the way. If you'd led? The toad sighed and got up. One could practically hear the creaking of his joints. Okay, off we go, he said before jumping off and landing on the ground. A few seconds went by before he jumped again, making it to the door. He turned around, eyeing everybody. What are you waiting for? Tsunade leaned over to Jiraiya. Should we just call Kakashi? I heard that. The toad shouted. Ain't nothing a dog can do that a toad can't. Now get your asses in gear. We're going turbo drive, the toad said before jumping out the door and into the hallway. This time, only a second passed before he jumped again. By shinobi standards, he was moving at a snail's pace. Tsunade pinched the bridge of her nose. I swear, on one side, I'm pressured by shady, backdoor dealings of dubious moral nature, and on the other, it's incompetence on the greatest level. Jiraiya sighed into the palm of his hand. I know. I'll call a faster one next time.